She was marrying the man who destroyed her, and he didn't even remember why. 5 years ago, the Duke of Ashford shattered Lady Amelia's heart with a single letter. Now, penniless and desperate, she must walk down the aisle to save her family. But when their eyes meet at the altar, the truth they've both buried will ignite a scandal that could destroy them both. Subscribe now, because this love story begins with revenge. The morning sun cast long shadows across Ashford Hall's grand entrance as her carriage wheels crunched against gravel, each rotation pulling her closer to the man she'd sworn to hate forever. The journey from Hartfield Manor to Ashford Hall had taken 4 hours, but for Lady Amelia Hartfield, it felt like a descent into her own execution. Each mile that disappeared beneath the carriage wheels carried her further from the life she'd known and closer to a future she'd spent 5 years trying to forget. The April countryside bloomed with wild flowers and fresh green leaves, nature celebrating spring's arrival with shameless joy, a cruel contrast to the winter that had taken permanent residence in her chest. She sat rigid against the velvet cushions, her spine refusing to touch the backrest, as if maintaining perfect posture could somehow salvage her dignity in this humiliating arrangement. The pale blue traveling dress she wore had been her mother's, altered and refreshed as best their limited means would allow. It was beautiful still, the silk holding its luster despite the years, but Amelia knew the aristocratic ladies of London would recognize it for what it was, a relic of better times, worn by a woman whose family name now carried more debt than prestige. Across from her sat her aunt, Lady Margaret Hartfield, her father's older sister who had agreed to serve as chaperone for this journey. Margaret's face was carefully neutral, but Amelia caught the occasional glance of pity that flickered across the older woman's features. That look was somehow worse than contempt would have been. "You must stop torturing yourself, child," Margaret said softly, breaking the silence that had stretched for the past hour. "The Duke is a good man, honourable, respected. Many young ladies would consider this a fortunate match." Amelia's hands tightened in her lap, her nails pressing crescents into her palms through her gloves. Many young ladies didn't know him as I did, she thought bitterly. Many young ladies didn't receive that letter. "I'm quite aware of my good fortune, Aunt," she replied, her voice carrying just enough ice to discourage further conversation on the subject. Margaret sighed but mercifully fell silent. She'd been trying to lift Amelia's spirits since they'd departed Hartfield Manor at dawn, but some wounds ran too deep for platitudes to heal. The older woman didn't know the full truth, of course. No one did except Amelia and the Duke, and whatever was left of the love they'd murdered 5 years ago. The carriage crested a hill, and suddenly Ashford Hall sprawled before them in all its magnificent glory. Amelia's breath caught despite herself. She'd seen it before, of course, during that brief, golden summer when she'd believed happiness was her birthright. But time and heartbreak had dulled her memories, and now the estate's grandeur struck her with fresh force. The main house rose 4 stories high, built of honey-coloured stone that glowed warm in the morning sunlight. Dozens of windows reflected the sky like mirrors, and the formal gardens stretched in geometric perfection toward ornamental lakes that glittered in the distance. The Duke's standard flew from the highest tower, 3 silver lions on a field of deep blue, the same crest that had sealed the letter that destroyed her. This would be her home now, her prison, more accurately, the place where she would play the role of devoted duchess, while her heart remained locked away in the past, forever 20 years old and foolishly in love. The carriage rolled up the sweeping drive, and Amelia forced herself to breathe steadily. She'd prepared for this moment, rehearsed it 1,000 times in her mind during the sleepless nights since the marriage contract had been signed. She would be composed, dignified. She would smile politely, speak gracefully, and give no indication that seeing Nicholas Pemberton, Duke of Ashford, again would be like pressing her hand against an open flame. The carriage halted before the main entrance, where a battalion of servants stood assembled in perfect formation. Footmen in the Ashford livery, dark blue coats with silver buttons, waited at attention. The butler, an imposing figure with silver hair and the bearing of a general, stood at the center of the formation like a conductor before an orchestra. The carriage door opened, and one of the footmen extended his hand. Amelia accepted it with a gracious nod, stepping down onto the gravel drive with practiced elegance. Her legs trembled slightly, but her skirts hid the weakness. She lifted her chin and surveyed the assembled household, with what she hoped passed for serene confidence. "Lady Amelia Hartfield," the butler intoned, bowing deeply. "Welcome to Ashford Hall. I am Jameson, His Grace's butler. The household is honoured to receive you." "Thank you, Jameson," Amelia replied, her voice steady. "Please convey my gratitude to the staff for this warm welcome." She waited for the Duke to appear. Surely he would come to greet his future bride, if only for the sake of propriety. But the grand entrance remained empty. The massive oak doors closed against her arrival. Jameson cleared his throat delicately. "His Grace apologizes for his absence, my lady. Urgent estate business required his attention this morning. He will join you for tea at 4 o'clock in the drawing room." The slight burned like acid. To not even greet her upon arrival, it was a calculated insult. A message delivered with aristocratic precision. "You are here out of obligation, not desire. Do not forget your place." Amelia's smile never wavered. "Of course. Estate business must take precedence. Please show us to our rooms." If Jameson noticed the frost in her tone, he was too well trained to show it. He gestured toward the entrance, and Amelia moved forward with her aunt trailing behind. As she crossed the threshold into Ashford Hall, she felt the weight of the house settle around her like chains forged from duty and decorated with silk. The entrance hall was even more magnificent than she remembered. A double staircase curved upward on either side, meeting at a landing beneath a domed ceiling painted with classical scenes, gods and goddesses frozen in their eternal dramas. Crystal chandeliers hung like frozen waterfalls, and portraits of Pemberton ancestors lined the walls, their painted eyes following her progress across the marble floor. One portrait in particular caught her attention. Nicholas's father, the late Duke, painted in his prime. The resemblance was striking, the same strong jaw, the same piercing grey eyes, the same air of absolute authority. The current Duke had inherited more than just his father's title and fortune. He'd inherited the old Duke's conviction that duty came before all else, including love, especially love. A young maid appeared, curtsying deeply. "If you'll follow me, Lady Amelia, I'll show you to your chambers. I'm Mary, my lady. I've been assigned as your personal maid." Amelia followed the girl up the sweeping staircase, her hand trailing along the polished banister. Everything in this house spoke of wealth, power, and permanence. The Ashford line stretched back centuries, their fortune built on land, investments, and strategic marriages. They were everything the Hartfields had once been, before her father's disastrous business ventures and gambling debts had reduced them to desperate supplicants. Mary led them down a long corridor lined with more portraits and priceless artwork. Finally, she stopped before a set of double doors and pushed them open with obvious pride. "The Duchess's suite, my lady." Amelia stepped inside and felt her breath catch again. The rooms were stunning. A spacious sitting room, decorated in shades of cream and gold, with tall windows overlooking the gardens. Through an open doorway, she glimpsed a bedroom with a canopied bed draped in silk. Everything was pristine, elegant, and utterly impersonal. "His Grace had the rooms completely redecorated for your arrival, my lady," Mary said, clearly expecting appreciation. "The previous Duchess's things were removed last month. He wanted you to have a fresh start." A fresh start. As if new wallpaper and modern furnishings could erase the past. "It's lovely," Amelia said, "because that's what was expected." "Thank you, Mary." The maid bobbed another curtsy. "I'll have your trunks brought up shortly, my lady. Is there anything else you require?" "No, thank you." "That will be all." Mary departed, and Amelia's aunt settled into one of the sitting-room chairs with a satisfied sigh. "Well, this is certainly comfortable. I told you the Duke would treat you well, Amelia. These rooms alone. Please, Aunt Margaret." Amelia moved to the window, staring out at the manicured gardens below. "Joy, I need a moment of quiet." She heard her aunt's offended sniff but didn't turn around. She couldn't bear to see more pity or, worse, Margaret's satisfied conviction that this marriage would solve all the Hartfield family's problems. It would solve their financial problems, certainly. The Duke's settlement had been extraordinarily generous, enough to pay off her father's debts, restore Hartfield Manor, and provide for her mother and younger sister in comfort. But some prices couldn't be calculated in pounds and properties. The afternoon dragged on with agonizing slowness. Amelia bathed and changed into her afternoon dress of lavender silk, one of 3 new gowns the Duke had commissioned for her trousseau. Mary styled her dark hair in an elegant arrangement of curls, and Amelia sat obediently while the maid worked, staring at her reflection without really seeing it. The woman in the mirror looked composed, beautiful even, though Amelia felt no connection to her own appearance anymore. The heartbreak of 5 years ago had carved something essential out of her, leaving behind a polished shell that moved and spoke and smiled, but felt nothing. At precisely 4 o'clock, Jameson appeared to escort her to the drawing room. Amelia followed him through the house's labyrinthine corridors, her heart pounding harder with each step. In moments, she would see Nicholas again. She would have to look into those grey eyes that had once held such warmth, such promise, and pretend they meant nothing to her now. The drawing-room doors opened, and Jameson announced her with formal precision. "Lady Amelia Hartfield, Your Grace." Amelia stepped inside, and there he was. Nicholas Pemberton, Duke of Ashford, stood beside the fireplace with one hand resting on the marble mantel. He'd changed since she'd last seen him, filled out through the shoulders, acquired a hardness to his features that hadn't been there during their summer together. His dark hair was shorter now, his jaw more defined, but those eyes were the same, grey as winter storms, carroty, and just as cold. He bowed, the gesture perfectly correct but utterly devoid of warmth. "Lady Amelia, welcome to Ashford Hall." His voice, God, his voice. Deep and refined, every syllable shaped by the finest education and generations of aristocratic breeding. She'd once loved the sound of that voice whispering her name in stolen moments. Now it scraped against her composure like broken glass. Amelia curtsied with equal formality. "Your Grace, thank you for your hospitality." They stood there, separated by 20 feet of expensive carpet and 5 years of silence, and Amelia felt the absurdity of it all crash over her. This man had written her love letters that made her weep with joy. He'd kissed her in the garden at midnight, under a sky full of stars, and promised her forever. He'd held her hand and told her she was his entire world, and then he'd sent that letter, 3 lines of formal, devastating rejection, and disappeared from her life as if she'd never existed. "Please sit," Nicholas said, gesturing to the seating arrangement near the windows. "Tea will be served shortly." Amelia took her seat with mechanical grace, folding her hands in her lap. Nicholas sat across from her, and for a moment neither spoke. The silence stretched, thick with everything they weren't saying. A maid appeared with the tea service, the delicate clink of porcelain filling the awkward void. Nicholas accepted his cup with a nod of thanks, but didn't drink. Amelia noticed his hand tightening on the handle, the only sign that he might not be as composed as he appeared. "I trust your journey was comfortable," he said finally, falling back on the safe territory of meaningless pleasantries. "Very comfortable, thank you." "Your rooms are satisfactory." "They're lovely." Another silence. This was torture. Exquisite, aristocratic torture. Nicholas set down his teacup with a soft clink. "Lady Amelia, I believe we should address the practical aspects of our arrangement. Arrangement, not engagement, not marriage, arrangement, as if they were discussing a business contract rather than the rest of their lives. Of course, Your Grace. The wedding will take place in 6 weeks at St. George's in London. The banns will be read beginning this Sunday. I've engaged a wedding planner to handle the details, but naturally, you should communicate any preferences regarding flowers, music, etc." Amelia almost laughed. He was discussing their wedding as if organizing a dinner party. "I'm sure whatever you've arranged will be suitable." Something flickered in his eyes, an annoyance, pain, but it vanished before she could identify it. "I've also arranged for a modest allowance to be established in your name immediately. You should feel free to purchase whatever you need, clothing, jewelry, personal items. Simply have the bills sent to my man of business." "That's very generous." The words tasted like ash. "For it's nothing more than proper." He stood abruptly, moving to the window with his hands clasped behind his back. His posture was rigid, his shoulders tense beneath his perfectly tailored coat. "I want to be clear about expectations, Lady Amelia. This is a marriage of convenience, beneficial to both our families. I will treat you with respect and courtesy. I will provide for you generously. In return, I expect you to fulfill your duties as Duchess of Ashford with grace and propriety. Duties, expectations, convenience. Every word was chosen to create distance, to establish boundaries, to make absolutely certain she understood that whatever they'd once had was dead and buried. Fine. Two could play this game. Amelia rose, meeting his gaze with steel in her own. I understand perfectly, Your Grace. You need a duchess to host your parties and produce your heirs. I need financial security for my family. We each get what we require from this arrangement. I assure you I will perform my duties flawlessly. You'll have no cause for complaint. His jaw tightened. I'm certain I won't. Then we have an understanding. She set down her teacup with deliberate precision. If you'll excuse me, I'm rather tired from the journey. I'll retire to my rooms. Of course. He moved to pull the bell cord. I'll have Jameson escort you. That won't be necessary. I can find my way. She moved toward the door, desperate to escape before the facade cracked, before he saw how much this coldness cost her. But his voice stopped her just before she reached the threshold. Amelia. Not Lady Amelia, just her name, spoken in a tone she remembered from another lifetime. She turned slowly, her hand on the door frame. He was looking at her now with an expression she couldn't read, something raw and quickly hidden. Yes, Your Grace. Whatever he'd been about to say died unspoken. His mask of indifference slid back into place. Nothing. Sleep well. Amelia fled, her composure holding until she reached her rooms. Only then, with the door safely closed and locked, did she allow herself to collapse into a chair and press her trembling hands against her face. 6 weeks. She had 6 weeks before she would stand beside him in a church and promise to love, honor, and cherish the man who had taught her that love was just another word for devastation. Outside her window, the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Somewhere in this vast house, Nicholas was likely pouring himself a brandy and congratulating himself on a difficult conversation handled well. Neither of them knew that beneath Ashford Hall's foundations, secrets lay buried, secrets that would soon surface and destroy everything they thought they knew about duty, honor, and the price of love denied. The game had begun, and this time, both of them would lose. The grand ballroom of Ashford Hall blazed with 1,000 candles. Crystal chandeliers caught and multiplied the light, sending prismatic shadows dancing across walls hung with silk damask. An orchestra occupied the gallery above, their music floating down like something from a dream, or perhaps a nightmare, depending on one's perspective. Lady Amelia stood at the top of the sweeping staircase, her hand resting lightly on the banister, and surveyed the sea of aristocratic faces below. 2 weeks had passed since her arrival at Ashford Hall, 2 weeks of careful distance and exquisitely polite conversations that said nothing. Tonight was her official introduction to society as the future Duchess of Ashford, a performance she'd been rehearsing her entire life, though never for stakes quite this high. The gown she wore had been Nicholas's choice, delivered that morning with a card bearing only his ducal seal. Midnight blue silk that seemed to capture starlight, with delicate silver embroidery along the bodice and sleeves. It was breathtaking, and she hated that he still remembered her favorite colors after all these years. "You look magnificent, my dear," Aunt Margaret whispered beside her, adjusting the diamond necklace, another gift from the Duke, that adorned Amelia's throat. "Every eye in the room will be on you." That was precisely what Amelia feared. Below, Nicholas stood at the center of a cluster of aristocrats, accepting their congratulations with his characteristic reserve. He wore formal evening dress, all sharp lines and aristocratic perfection. Even from this distance, Amelia could feel the weight of his presence, the way every person in the room oriented themselves toward him like planets around the sun. "The Duke of Ashford and Lady Amelia Hartfield," Jameson announced, his voice carrying across the suddenly hushed ballroom. Nicholas looked up, and their eyes met across the expanse of air and social expectation. For one breathless moment, something flickered in his gaze. Recognition, perhaps, or memory of another ball 5 years ago when a younger, more foolish version of themselves had danced until dawn. Then the mask slipped back into place, and he was ascending the stairs to offer his arm. "You look lovely," he said quietly, for her ears alone. His voice carried a strange note she couldn't identify. "Thank you, the gown is beautiful. I thought the color would suit you." His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. I was correct. They descended together, and Amelia was acutely aware of every point of contact, his arm beneath her gloved hand, the warmth of him beside her, the familiar scent of his cologne mixed with something uniquely him. Her body remembered what her mind tried to forget. The crowd parted before them like water around a ship's prow. Amelia smiled graciously as Nicholas made introductions, her performance flawless. The Dowager Duchess of Somerset, dripping in emeralds and disapproval. Lord and Lady Pemberton, Nicholas's uncle and aunt, assessing her with calculating eyes. The Earl of Whitmore and his simpering daughter, who'd clearly had designs on becoming Duchess herself. "Such a whirlwind courtship," Lady Pemberton said, her smile sharp as cut glass. "We'd heard you were quite determined to remain a bachelor, Nicholas, dear. Whatever changed your mind?" "I realized it was past time to secure the succession," Nicholas replied smoothly. "Lady Amelia comes from excellent family. The match is suitable in every respect." Suitable. Amelia's smile never wavered, though the word landed like a slap. She was suitable, appropriate, a checked box on his ducal responsibilities. "And Lady Amelia," the Dowager Duchess interjected, her shrewd eyes missing nothing, "I understand your family has experienced some financial difficulties recently. How fortunate that the Duke's generosity could provide relief." The implication hung in the perfumed air. "You're here for his money. Don't pretend otherwise." Amelia met the older woman's gaze with cool composure. "My father made some unfortunate investments, Your Grace. The Duke has been gracious in his settlement. I intend to prove myself worthy of his consideration. I'm certain you will try, dear." The Dowager's tone suggested she found success unlikely. Nicholas's hand tightened fractionally on Amelia's arm, a warning or support, she couldn't tell. "If you'll excuse us, the first waltz is beginning. Tradition dictates that I open the ball with my future bride." He led her onto the dance floor before anyone could protest. The orchestra struck up a Viennese waltz, and suddenly they were moving together, his hand at her waist, hers on his shoulder, their bodies falling into the familiar rhythm as if 5 years hadn't passed. "You didn't have to defend yourself to them," Nicholas said quietly, his eyes fixed somewhere over her shoulder. "Didn't I? They think I'm a fortune hunter. They think whatever serves their entertainment, society thrives on gossip. How convenient for them that we provide such excellent material." His gaze snapped to hers, something dangerous flashing in those grey depths. What exactly do you mean by that?" "Nothing, Your Grace. Merely that our arrangement is unconventional in its speed. There's nothing unconventional about arranged marriages among our class." "No," Amelia agreed softly. "I suppose there isn't." They turned in silence, the music swelling around them. Other couples joined the dance now, but Amelia barely noticed. She was trapped in Nicholas's arms, in the strange intimacy of the waltz, remembering another ball and another dance when everything between them had been different. "You're thinking about it," Nicholas said suddenly. "I can see it in your face." "Thinking about what?" "The Carmichael ball 5 years ago." Amelia's breath caught. He'd said it, actually acknowledged the past existed. "I wasn't—" "Don't lie, Amelia. We may be performing for society, but we don't need to lie to each other." "Fine. Yes, I was remembering. We danced 3 waltzes that night. Everyone was scandalized. My father was furious. A ghost of something, amusement, regret, touched his features. He said I was making a spectacle of myself over a girl with no fortune and questionable connections. He wasn't wrong about my connections." Amelia kept her voice light, despite the pain blooming in her chest. "My uncle's scandal had just broken. My family was practically ruined even then. Your family's difficulties weren't your fault. No, but they were my burden to bear." She met his eyes directly. "As you made abundantly clear in your letter." Nicholas's step faltered, barely noticeable to anyone watching, but Amelia felt it. His expression shuttered immediately. That letter was necessary. To break an engagement 3 days before the wedding. Yes, I suppose efficiency is a virtue. There was no formal engagement. We had an understanding, nothing more. An understanding. Amelia laughed, the sound brittle. Is that what you call it when a man promises a woman forever and then disappears from her life with 3 lines of dismissal? Amelia. Dear Lady Amelia, she recited, the words burned into her memory. Upon reflection and consultation with my family, I have determined that our association cannot continue. I wish you every happiness in your future endeavors. Ashford. She smiled up at him with poisonous sweetness. Such eloquent sentiment. I've treasured it these 5 years. The muscle in Nicholas's jaw was working overtime now. That letter was a kindness. A kindness? You destroyed me. I saved you. The words burst from him with unexpected vehemence. Several nearby couples glanced their way, and Nicholas immediately moderated his tone, though his grip on her waist tightened. I saved you from a life of regret and resentment. How noble. And now, what is this, if not a life of regret? This is duty, responsibility, something you apparently understand now that your family needs my money. The accusation hit like a physical blow. Amelia stumbled, and only Nicholas's firm hold kept her from faltering in the dance. She stared at him, seeing a stranger in place of the man she'd once loved. How dare you? She whispered. It's the truth, isn't it? 5 years ago, you were a romantic girl who believed in love matches and fairy tales. Now you're a practical woman who understands that marriage is a transaction. Your family's solvency in exchange for my need for an heir. At least I'm honest about the transaction. You're the one pretending duty compelled you when we both know... She stopped herself, but too late. When we both know what? Nicholas demanded. Finish your thought, Amelia. But she couldn't. Couldn't voice the suspicion that had haunted her for 5 years, that he'd chosen duty over love, not because he'd stopped loving her, but because he'd loved her too much and feared what that vulnerability meant. The waltz ended, and they stood frozen amid the applauding crowd. Nicholas released her so abruptly she swayed, and his face could have been carved from marble. I have other guests to attend to, he said formally. Lord Whitmore has requested an introduction. I trust you can entertain yourself for the remainder of the evening. He walked away, leaving her standing alone at the center of the ballroom floor. Amelia forced herself to smile, to appear unaffected as curious eyes dissected every micro-expression. She moved toward the refreshment table with her head high, accepting a glass of champagne from a passing servant. Well, that was quite a performance. Amelia turned to find a woman she didn't recognize, mid-30s, elegant in emerald silk, with knowing eyes and an amused smile. I beg your pardon. The cold, formal dance followed by the Duke abandoning you publicly. Masterful. Society will be gossiping about it for weeks. The woman extended her hand. Lady Rothmore, Clara, if you prefer. We haven't been properly introduced, but I feel we should be friends. Amelia accepted the handshake warily. Why is that? Because you're about to become Duchess of Ashford, and you have absolutely no idea what you're walking into. Clara's smile widened. Come, let's take a turn in the gardens. It's stifling in here, and I have things to tell you about your future husband that you really ought to know. Against her better judgment, Amelia found herself following Lady Rothmore through the French doors and onto the terrace. The April night was cool, the gardens illuminated by lanterns hung in the trees. Other couples strolled the paths, seeking privacy for flirtations or business discussions. Clara led her to a secluded corner near a marble fountain where the splash of water would cover their conversation. I knew your Nicholas 5 years ago, Clara said without preamble. Before you, actually. We moved in the same circles that summer. Nicholas and I aren't. We don't have a relationship beyond our arrangement. Please. I watched you dance. I saw the way he looked at you when he thought no one was watching. That man is tormented. Clara's expression sobered. But he's also trapped, just as you are. I don't understand. The old Duke, Nicholas's father, was a tyrant. Brilliant, Powerful and absolutely ruthless about maintaining the Ashford legacy, he arranged marriages for both his children without any regard for their feelings. Amelia's stomach tightened. Nicholas has a sister. Had Lady Georgiana. She married the man the old Duke chose, a wealthy earl twice her age whom she despised. She died in childbirth 3 years into the marriage. Clara's voice hardened. Some said it was complications. Others whispered she'd been slowly poisoning herself with laudanum to escape her misery. The world tilted slightly. Nicholas never mentioned. Of course he didn't. The old Duke forbade anyone from speaking of it. Georgiana became a ghost, erased from family history except for her portrait in the gallery, and Nicholas learned his lesson. Love is dangerous, feeling is weakness, and duty is the only currency that matters. Why are you telling me this? Clara studied her for a long moment. Because 5 years ago, Nicholas defied his father for the first time in his life. He fell in love with you, truly, deeply in love. I watched it happen. He was going to marry you despite his father's fury, despite your family's scandal, despite everything. Amelia's hands trembled. Then why? Because the old Duke threatened to destroy not just Nicholas, but your entire family, your father's debts. The Duke could have called them all due immediately, sent your father to debtor's prison. Your younger sister, he had friends who could arrange for her reputation to be utterly ruined, making her unmarriageable. Your mother, he would have ensured she was cut from every respectable home in England. The fountain seemed impossibly loud, each splash of water magnified. You're lying. I wish I were. The old Duke came to me. I was his goddaughter, so he trusted me to be discreet. He asked me to deliver a message to Nicholas, choose the girl, and watch her entire family suffer for it, or end it cleanly and preserve what little dignity the Hartfields had left. The letter, Amelia whispered, was an act of sacrifice, not rejection. Nicholas loved you too much to let his father destroy you. Amelia pressed her hand to her stomach, feeling sick. But the old Duke is dead. He died 2 years ago. Why didn't Nicholas come back to you? Because by then, your family's situation had worsened. Your father's gambling debts mounted. Your sister needed a dowry for her season. And Nicholas had inherited not just a title, but a mountain of responsibility. Estates to manage, tenants depending on him, family legacy to uphold. He needed a wife who could help him bear those burdens. So he chose me again, not out of love, but duty. Or perhaps, Clara said gently, he spent 5 years trying to kill what he feels for you, and failing. Perhaps this marriage is his last desperate attempt to have you in his life, in the only way he knows how. Footsteps on the gravel path interrupted them. Nicholas appeared around the hedge, his face thunderous. Lady Rothmore, I wasn't aware you'd been invited this evening. Your aunt extended the invitation. Your Grace, we're old friends. Clara curtsied with exaggerated courtesy. I was just becoming acquainted with your lovely fiancée. She's absolutely charming. I'm certain she is. If you'll excuse us, I need to speak with Lady Amelia privately. Clara caught Amelia's eye, conveying a world of meaning in a single glance. Then she swept away, leaving them alone beside the fountain. Nicholas waited until her footsteps faded before speaking. What did she tell you? The truth. Amelia's voice shook despite her efforts to control it. About your father, about the threats, about why you sent that letter. He went very still. Clara had no right. Didn't she? I've spent 5 years believing you were a coward who abandoned me at the first sign of difficulty. When all along you were trying to protect me. Tears burned behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Why didn't you tell me? Why let me hate you? Because hate is safer than love. Nicholas's face was anguished now, all masks stripped away. Hate gives you armor. Love makes you vulnerable. And I couldn't... His voice broke. After Georgiana, I couldn't watch another woman I loved be destroyed by this family. So you destroyed us instead. Yes? The admission seemed to cost him everything, and I'd do it again if it meant keeping you safe from him. But he's dead, Nicholas. Your father can't hurt us anymore. Can't he? Nicholas laughed bitterly. His legacy lives on. The expectations, the responsibilities, the weight of centuries of Ashford duty. I am my father's son, Amelia. I always will be. And that means... What? That we can never be happy? That we're doomed to this cold performance for the rest of our lives? I don't know. The confession seemed torn from him. All I know is that I look at you and I feel everything I've spent 5 years trying to bury, and it terrifies me. Amelia stepped closer, close enough to see the gold flecks in his grey eyes. I'm terrified too, but maybe we don't have to do this alone. For one suspended moment, hope flickered between them. Nicholas's hand lifted, as if to touch her face, and Amelia held her breath, waiting. Then voices approached, other guests seeking the garden's privacy, and Nicholas stepped back abruptly. The walls slammed back into place, leaving his expression neutral and distant. We should return to the ball. People will talk if we're absent too long. The moment shattered like crystal. Amelia felt the loss physically, a hollow ache spreading through her chest. Of course, Your Grace. Wouldn't want to give society more gossip fodder. She moved past him toward the terrace, but his voice stopped her. Amelia. She didn't turn. Yes. For what it's worth, I'm sorry for all of it. Sorry doesn't change anything, Nicholas. We're still trapped in this arrangement, still performing this charade. I know. She left him standing alone in the garden, surrounded by carefully cultivated beauty and the ghosts of love letters he'd never sent. The remainder of the ball passed in a blur of forced smiles and meaningless conversations. Amelia danced with Lord Whitmore and his son, with Nicholas's uncle and several other noblemen whose names she immediately forgot. She laughed at appropriate moments and deflected nosy questions about her rapid engagement with practiced ease. But her mind was elsewhere. Turning over Clara's revelations like stones in her hand, Nicholas had sacrificed their love to protect her. He'd spent 5 years alone with his grief and duty, and now they were bound together in a marriage that gave them proximity but denied them connection. It was a special kind of torture. Near midnight, Nicholas found her again. I'll escort you to your rooms. You must be exhausted. They walked in silence through Ashford Hall's maze of corridors. Their footsteps echoed on marble, the only sound besides Amelia's rustling skirts. When they reached her door, Nicholas stopped. Thank you for tonight. You performed your role admirably. As did you, Your Grace. She couldn't keep the bitterness from her voice. As we make quite the convincing couple. Amelia, good night, Nicholas. She fled into her rooms before he could say more, leaning back against the closed door as tears finally fell. Mary appeared to help her undress, chattering about the ball's success, but Amelia barely heard her. Later, alone in the massive canopied bed, Amelia stared at the ceiling and tried to imagine 6 weeks from now. The wedding. The vows. The wedding night that would cement this arrangement in the most intimate way possible. Could she survive it? Could she lie beside Nicholas every night, knowing what they'd lost? Could she bear his children and raise them in this house heavy with duty and dead love? She didn't know, but she also didn't have a choice. Somewhere in the house, Nicholas lay awake with similar thoughts. And between their separate rooms, Ashford Hall kept its secrets, letters hidden in locked drawers, family scandals buried in dusty archives, and truths that would soon surface to destroy whatever fragile peace they'd managed to build. The ghosts of the past weren't finished with them yet. The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of Ashford Hall's library, illuminating thousands of leather-bound volumes and catching dust motes in its golden beams. Amelia sat curled in a window seat, a book of poetry forgotten in her lap, as she stared out at the gardens below. 3 days had passed since the ball, 3 days of careful avoidance and polite distance that felt like slow suffocation. She'd taken to spending her mornings in the library, the one room in this vast house where she felt she could breathe. Nicholas never came here before noon, preferring to conduct his business from his study in the East Wing. It had become her sanctuary, her brief escape from the performance of being the perfect future Duchess. The sound of footsteps in the corridor made her tense, but they passed without stopping. Amelia released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding and returned her attention to the window. The gardeners were at work below, trimming hedges into geometric precision. Everything at Ashford Hall was controlled, manicured, perfect. Nothing wild or spontaneous was permitted to exist. Rather like her future, she thought bitterly. A small, almost imperceptible click drew her attention. Amelia turned to see one of the library's side panels, what she'd assumed was decorative woodwork, swing open slightly, as if the latch hadn't caught properly. Behind it, darkness beckoned. Curiosity overrode caution. Amelia set aside her book and approached the panel. Pushing it wider, a narrow passageway was revealed, with stone steps leading down into shadow. A secret passage. Then, most old houses had them, remnants of more dangerous times when quick escape routes were necessary. She should close it, should leave well enough alone, should return to her book and pretend she'd seen nothing. Instead, she found a candlestick, lit it from the library's fireplace, and stepped into the passage. The air grew cooler as she descended, the stone walls pressing close on either side. The stairs twisted and turned, leading deeper into Ashford Hall's foundations. Amelia's heart pounded, but she continued, driven by something she couldn't name, a sense that she was meant to find whatever lay at the end of this passage. The stairs ended at a small room, barely larger than a closet. Stone shelves lined the walls, and on them sat dozens of wooden boxes, each labeled with dates and initials. Amelia held her candle higher, reading the labels. The boxes went back decades. Some bore dates from before Nicholas was born. One box caught her eye. N.P. 1819, 1820. Nicholas's initials, and the year would have made him 21. The summer they'd met. The summer everything had changed. Her hands trembled as she lifted the box from its shelf. It was heavier than expected, and when she opened it, she understood why. Inside were letters, dozens of them, all in Nicholas's handwriting. She recognized it immediately, that distinctive slant and decisive stroke. But these letters weren't addressed to anyone. They were drafts, she realized. Letters written and rewritten but never sent. She lifted the first one, holding it close to the candlelight. My dearest Amelia, every day without you is an eternity. I wake and think of you. I attend to business and think of you. I lie down to sleep and dream only of you. My father says I am besotted, and he's correct, though he means it as an insult. I would wear your name as a badge of honor if society permitted such things. Tomorrow I must attend another tedious dinner, where suitable young ladies will be paraded before me like prized horses at auction. I will smile politely and dance appropriately, and think only of you, of the way you laugh when you're truly amused, not the polite titter society demands, of how your eyes reflect the sky, of how when you touch my hand, the entire world narrows to that single point of contact. I am lost, my love, utterly and completely lost to you. Forever yours. Nicholas. Amelia's vision blurred with tears. This letter had been written during their courtship. She could tell before everything had fallen apart. She set it aside carefully and reached for another. Amelia, I have written this letter 17 times. Each attempt fails to capture what I need to say. But time is running out and I must try once more. My father has given me an ultimatum. End our association, or he will destroy your family. He has the power to do it. Connections to call in your father's debts. Friends who could ruin your sister's prospects. Influence to ensure your mother is cut from society entirely. He demonstrated his seriousness by having your father's primary creditor demand immediate payment. Only my father's intervention delayed the reckoning. I don't doubt his willingness to follow through. I watched him destroy my sister's happiness without remorse. I cannot let him do the same to you, so I must write the letter that will break both our hearts. 3 lines of formal dismissal that say nothing of what I feel. You will hate me. You should hate me. It's safer for you that way. Know this. Every day for the rest of my life, I will remember you. I will remember the way you challenged me during our debates about poetry, the way you looked at me when we danced, the way you said my name, not Your Grace, but Nicholas, as if I were simply a man and not a title. I love you. I will always love you. And that is precisely why I must let you go. Forgive me. N. The letter slipped from Amelia's fingers, fluttering to the stone floor. She stood frozen. the full weight of Nicholas's sacrifice crashing over her like a wave. He'd written this, poured his heart into words he'd never sent, before composing that cold, brutal dismissal that had destroyed her. Clara had told the truth. All of it. Amelia sank to the floor, her skirts pooling around her, and reached for more letters. One after another, she read Nicholas's private anguish, letters written in the months after their separation, filled with regret and longing, letters written after his father's death, where hope warred with despair, letters written just weeks ago when he'd learned of her family's desperation and made his offer. I told myself I was past this. That 5 years had been enough to excise her from my heart, but the moment I saw her name on the list of potential brides my aunt suggested, I knew I'd been lying to myself. I can have her now. Not in the way I wanted, not with joy and anticipation and love freely given, but I can have her beside me. I can wake each morning knowing she's under my roof. I can protect her, provide for her, ensure she never wants for anything, except love, except honesty, except the truth of what she means to me. Perhaps it's better this way. Perhaps keeping her at a distance will hurt less than allowing her close enough to wound me again. God knows I can't survive losing her twice. "What are you doing down here?" Amelia gasped, spinning toward the stairs. Nicholas stood in the doorway, his face a mask of shock and something that looked like panic. His eyes went immediately to the open box, the scattered letters, and understanding dawned. "You read them?" Not a question. An accusation. A confession. Amelia rose slowly, clutching one of the letters to her chest. "Why did you keep these? Why write them if you never intended to send them?" "Give those back." Nicholas descended the stairs in 3 quick strides, reaching for the letters. Amelia stepped back. "No, not until you explain." "There's nothing to explain. They're private correspondence that you had no right to read." "Private correspondence? Nicholas, these are love letters, dozens of them, spanning 5 years, all addressed to me and never sent." "Exactly. Never sent for a reason." His composure cracked, anger and anguish bleeding through. They were a way of managing feelings I couldn't express. "They meant nothing." "Liar." Amelia's voice shook. "You wrote that you loved me, that you would always love me, that letting me go was the hardest thing you'd ever done. I wrote many things in moments of weakness. It doesn't change our circumstances." "Our circumstances?" She laughed, the sound breaking. "Nicholas, we're about to be married. We're going to spend the rest of our lives together. How can you stand there and claim these feelings are irrelevant?" "Because they are." He grabbed her shoulders, his grip firm but not painful, his face inches from hers. "Don't you understand? Love isn't enough. It wasn't enough to overcome my father's threats 5 years ago, and it's not enough now to overcome everything that stands between us." "What stands between us except your stubbornness and fear?" "Reality stands between us. The fact that you're here because your family needs money and I need an heir. The fact that whatever we felt years ago is buried under betrayal and hurt." "Is it?" Amelia searched his face, seeing past his anger to the pain beneath. "Or have you just convinced yourself it is because feeling anything else is too dangerous?" Nicholas released her abruptly, stepping back and running a hand through his hair. "You shouldn't have found these. The passage wasn't supposed to be accessible. But I did find them, and now I know the truth. You never stopped loving me. Love is a luxury neither of us can afford." His voice had gone cold again, defensive walls slamming back into place. "I propose we forget you ever found this room. We'll continue with our arrangement as planned. In 4 weeks, we'll be married. We'll be cordial, respectful, and appropriately distant. Those letters change nothing. They change everything." "No." Nicholas moved to gather the scattered letters, returning them to their box with mechanical precision. "They're relics of a past we can't reclaim. Leave them buried where they belong." Amelia watched him work, frustration and heartbreak warring in her chest. "Why are you so determined to push me away? I understand now what you sacrificed. I know you were trying to protect me. We could start again, build something real, and if I fail?" The question burst from him raw and desperate. "If I let you close and something happens, If loving you puts you in danger again, I can't—" His voice broke. "After Georgiana, I swore I would never let duty destroy someone I loved again. But it did anyway. It destroyed you 5 years ago, and it will destroy you again if we're foolish enough to believe we can overcome it. You're not your father, Nicholas, aren't I? I'm the Duke of Ashford. I have the same responsibilities, the same expectations, the same impossible weight of legacy. Everything I touch withers under that burden. I won't watch it happen to you again." He closed the box and returned it to its shelf, then turned to face her with terrible finality in his eyes. "Go back upstairs, Amelia. Forget what you've read. We'll proceed as planned. A marriage of convenience that protects us both from the dangers of feeling too much. And if I refuse, if I insist we acknowledge what's really between us, then you'll be disappointed." He gestured toward the stairs. "After you, Lady Amelia, I'll seal this passage so you won't stumble across it again." Amelia wanted to argue, to fight, to make him see reason, but the set of his jaw and the ice in his eyes told her it would be futile. Nicholas had locked himself in a prison of duty and fear, and he'd thrown away the key. She ascended the stairs with as much dignity as she could muster, emerging back into the library's golden sunlight. It seemed obscenely cheerful after the darkness of the hidden room. She heard Nicholas behind her, doing something with the panel's mechanism, then the decisive click of a lock engaging. "The passage will remain sealed," he said. "I apologize for the distress this discovery caused you." Formal, distant, as if they were strangers discussing an unfortunate incident, Amelia turned to face him, seeing the man she loved buried beneath layers of aristocratic ice. "You're a coward, Nicholas Pemberton." His eyes flashed. "Excuse me. You heard me. 5 years ago, your father was the obstacle. Now he's dead, and you've become your own jailer. You're so terrified of being hurt that you'd rather live a half-life than risk being fully alive. That's not—" "It is. You'd rather marry me and keep me at arm's length than admit you still feel something. You'd rather write letters you'll never send than have an honest conversation. You're choosing loneliness and calling it nobility." "And what would you have me do?" Nicholas demanded, his composure finally shattering completely. "Throw caution aside. Pretend the past 5 years didn't happen. Ignore every lesson I've learned about the price of vulnerability. I'd have you be brave enough to try." Amelia's voice rose, months of suppressed emotion breaking free. "I'd have you acknowledge that we might actually be able to build something real instead of this cold, miserable arrangement. I'd have you trust me enough to let me in." They stood facing each other in the sunlit library, both breathing hard, all pretense stripped away. For a moment, Amelia thought she'd finally broken through his defenses. His eyes held such longing, such barely restrained need. Then footsteps in the corridor shattered the moment. Jameson's voice called out, "Your Grace, Lord Pemberton has arrived unexpectedly. He's waiting in your study." Nicholas's expression shuttered immediately. "Thank you, Jameson. I'll attend to him shortly." He straightened his coat, every inch the perfect duke once more. "If you'll excuse me, Lady Amelia, we can discuss the wedding arrangements later this evening." Nicholas, but he was already walking away, leaving her alone in the library surrounded by thousands of words written by people brave enough to express their feelings. Amelia sank into the window seat, her mind racing. She'd found the letters. She knew the truth. Nicholas loved her, had never stopped loving her, but he was so damaged by his past, so terrified of vulnerability, that he would rather build walls than bridges. The question was, could she break through those walls before their wedding day? Or would she spend the rest of her life married to a man who loved her but refused to admit it? A thought struck her suddenly. If Nicholas had kept letters, what else might be hidden in this house? What other secrets lay buried in Ashford Hall's foundations? She glanced at the sealed passage, then at the library's endless shelves. Somewhere in this collection of history and family records, there might be answers. Information about the old Duke's machinations, evidence of the threats he'd made, perhaps even letters from Georgiana, giving voice to the sister Nicholas never spoke of. Amelia stood decision crystallizing. If Nicholas wouldn't be honest with her, she would uncover the truth herself. She would learn everything about this family and its dark history. And then she would decide whether to accept her fate or fight for something better. She moved to the shelves containing family documents and began to search. Hours passed as she carefully examined ledgers, correspondence, and records. The afternoon sun slanted through the windows, and still she searched, driven by desperate determination. Finally, hidden behind a row of agricultural reports, she found it, a leather portfolio embossed with initials G. Fias Georgiana Pemberton. Amelia's hands trembled as she opened it. Inside were letters, diary entries, and sketches. The handwriting was elegant but increasingly erratic as the dates progressed. She began to read, and with each page, a picture emerged of a young woman trapped by duty, ground down by an unhappy marriage, slowly losing hope. I cannot bear another day of this. My husband views me as property, something to be displayed at parties and used to produce heirs. Papa says I must endure, that duty requires sacrifice. But how much must I sacrifice? My happiness, my spirit, my will to live? Nicholas visited today. He's the only one who sees my misery, though he says nothing directly. I see it in his eyes, the guilt, the rage, the helplessness. He hates Papa for arranging this marriage. He hates himself for not protecting me. I tried to tell him it's not his fault, but he wouldn't hear it. My brilliant, burdened brother, carrying the weight of my mistakes along with his own. I dream of freedom. Sometimes in the darkest hours, I think there's only one way to achieve it. But I cannot do that to Nicholas. He's already lost so much. I must endure. I must find a way to endure. The entries ended abruptly. The date of the final entry was 3 weeks before Georgiana's death. Amelia closed the portfolio, tears streaming down her face. Now she understood. Nicholas hadn't just lost his sister. He'd watched her be destroyed by the same system he now upheld. No wonder he was terrified. No wonder he kept everyone at a distance. But there was something else in the portfolio. A letter addressed to Nicholas in Georgiana's hand, sealed with wax that had never been broken. It must have been found after her death and filed away with her effects, never delivered. Amelia held it up to the light, debating. She'd already invaded Nicholas's privacy by reading his letters. Reading his dead sister's correspondence would be an even greater transgression. But if this letter contained information that could help her understand him, help her reach him. Before she could second-guess herself, Amelia broke the seal and unfolded the paper. My dearest Nicholas, if you're reading this, I am gone. Please don't mourn me too deeply. I am finally free. I write this to you because you are the only one who might understand. Papa's control, his manipulation, his absolute conviction that duty matters more than happiness. It has poisoned our entire family. He destroyed my chance at happiness, and he will try to destroy yours too if you let him. Do not become him, Nicholas. Do not let duty consume you until there's nothing left of the man you truly are. Fall in love. Marry for passion, not position. Let yourself be vulnerable, even though it's terrifying. I know you're afraid. I know you think protecting others means keeping them at a distance. But the truth is, distance doesn't protect anyone. It just ensures we die alone, surrounded by duty and strangers. There's more I must tell you. The night before I married, Papa came to my room. He showed me letters, evidence of a young woman father had ruined years ago when she'd refused his advances. He threatened to do the same to her daughter if I didn't comply with the marriage. I had no choice, Nicholas. I sacrificed myself to save someone I'd never met. Papa is not the man of honor everyone believes him to be. He is cruel, calculating, and will stop at nothing to maintain the Ashford legacy. If you ever find someone you love, protect them from him at all costs. But also don't become him in the process of fighting him. Live, Nicholas. Truly live. For both of us, with all my love. Georgiana P.S. The woman Papa threatened was Lady Catherine Hartfield. You should know that. The letter fell from Amelia's nerveless fingers. Lady Catherine Hartfield, her mother. Everything clicked into place with horrifying clarity. The old Duke hadn't just threatened her family randomly. There was history there. He'd attacked her mother years ago, been refused, and sought revenge by threatening Catherine's daughters. Georgiana had known. And Nicholas? Did Nicholas know? Had he discovered this connection and kept it from her? The library door opened. Nicholas entered, stopping short when he saw her face. "Amelia, what's wrong? You look—" His eyes fell on the open portfolio, on Georgiana's letter lying on the floor. All colour drained from his face. "Where did you find that?" "Hidden in the shelves. Nicholas, did you know? About your father and my mother." He closed his eyes, his jaw working. When he opened them again, they held such pain that Amelia's anger faltered. "I found out 2 years ago after my father died. Going through his papers, I discovered evidence, letters he'd kept. A sick trophy, I suppose." Nicholas's voice was hollow. "That's when I understood the full extent of his depravity. He didn't just threaten your family randomly. He was punishing your mother for rejecting him decades ago. And you never told me. How could I?" He moved toward her, his movements almost mechanical. "How could I tell you that my father was a monster who'd tormented your mother, that his threats against you 5 years ago were part of a vendetta that predated your birth, that every terrible thing that happened to us was connected to his cruelty? By being honest, by trusting me with the truth. The truth would have changed nothing except add more pain. Your mother doesn't know. My father was careful to ensure his attack was subtle enough that she didn't recognize it as revenge. Why burden her with that knowledge now?" Amelia stared at him, seeing the full tragedy of their situation. They were bound together not just by love and duty, but by a web of family secrets and old sins. Nicholas's father had tormented her mother, destroyed his own daughter, and used his son as a weapon against the very woman Nicholas loved. "We're cursed," she whispered. "Our families are bound by cruelty and pain. How can we possibly build a life together with this foundation?" Nicholas reached for her hand, his touch tentative. "I don't know, but I know I'm tired of running from it. Tired of letting my father's ghost dictate my choices." He gestured to Georgiana's letter. "She was right. I've been so afraid of becoming him that I've locked myself away, but in doing so, I've honored his legacy of isolation and control. So, what do? We try." His fingers tightened on hers. "We acknowledge the truth, all of it, no matter how ugly. We stop hiding behind formal distance. He took a shaky breath. "We let ourselves feel what we feel, and we face whatever comes together. It wasn't a declaration of love. It wasn't a promise that everything would be perfect, but it was honest, and that was more than they'd had before." Amelia squeezed his hand. "Together. Together." He pulled her closer, his forehead touching hers. "I'm terrified, Amelia. Terrified I'll fail you. Terrified I'm too damaged to be what you need. Then we'll be terrified together, and we'll try anyway." For the first time since her arrival at Ashford Hall, Nicholas smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes and transformed his face into something younger, hopeful. "My brave Amelia. Always braver than I deserve." He kissed her then, soft and tentative, as if sealing a promise they were both afraid to make. When they parted, tears shone in both their eyes. They had 4 weeks until the wedding, 4 weeks to untangle decades of family secrets, 4 weeks to decide if love could overcome the weight of duty and legacy. It wouldn't be easy, but for the first time, it felt possible. The storm arrived without warning, sweeping across the English countryside with the fury of nature unleashed. Rain lashed against Ashford Hall's windows, and thunder rolled through the valleys like cannon fire. Amelia stood at her bedroom window watching the tempest transform the manicured gardens into something wild and untamed, lightning illuminating the landscape in stark flashes of white. It had been 3 days since their conversation in the library. 3 days of tentative honesty and careful steps toward something neither of them quite dared to name. Nicholas had begun joining her for breakfast, their conversations gradually moving beyond polite pleasantries into actual discourse. They'd discussed books, politics, estate management, topics that revealed the people they'd become during their 5 years apart. But they hadn't spoken again about the letters, about Georgiana, about his father's sins, or their tangled family histories. Those truths hung between them like ghosts, acknowledged but not yet exorcised. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts, Mary entered, looking worried. "Begging your pardon, my lady, but His Grace requests that you join him in his study. Says it's urgent." Amelia's stomach tightened. "Did he say what it concerns?" "No, my lady, but he seemed troubled." 5 minutes later, Amelia stood outside Nicholas's private study, a room she'd never been invited to enter. She smoothed her skirts, knocked, and heard his voice call out permission to enter. The study was quintessentially masculine, dark wood paneling, leather furniture, and walls lined with books and maps. Her fire crackled in the hearth despite the warmth of the day, perhaps meant to combat the gloom of the storm. Nicholas stood at the window, his back to her, hands clasped behind him in a posture that radiated tension. "You wanted to see me," Amelia ventured. He turned, and she saw immediately that something was wrong. His face was pale, his jaw tight with suppressed emotion. On his desk lay an opened letter, the paper expensive, the handwriting elegant. "I received correspondence from London this morning," Nicholas said without preamble. "From Lord Pemberton, my uncle. It seems word of our engagement has reached certain interested parties who are eager to share information they claim I should know about my future wife." Amelia's blood ran cold. What kind of information? Allegations? He picked up the letter, his fingers crushing the paper. "About your conduct during our separation, specifically about your relationship with a certain Captain James Whitmore." The name hit like a physical blow. Amelia steadied herself against the back of a chair. "I see. Is it true?" Nicholas's voice was carefully controlled, but she could hear the storm beneath, matching the tempest outside. "Were you engaged to Captain Whitmore 18 months ago?" There was no point in lying. The truth would emerge regardless. "Yes." Briefly. Something flickered across Nicholas's face. Pain, betrayal, or perhaps vindication that his walls had been justified. How brief? 3 months. The engagement was announced in the papers. It ended before any wedding arrangements were finalized. "Why?" Amelia met his gaze steadily. "Because I didn't love him. Because I was trying to forget you and failing miserably. Because marrying him would have been a lie, and I couldn't do that to either of us." Nicholas set down the letter, his movements precise and controlled. "My uncle's correspondent was quite detailed. According to their account, Captain Whitmore ended the engagement after discovering you were, how did they phrase it, hopelessly attached to a previous connection. The scandal was apparently contained, but not eliminated. Society remembers." "And what else does this benevolent correspondent claim?" "That you've been considered unmarriageable for the past year, that your family's desperation to secure you a husband reached such heights that they would have accepted anyone with means, that I'm a fool being trapped by a woman who still pines for a man who abandoned her." His voice cracked slightly on the last words. "They suggest you're using me as a replacement for what you truly wanted." Amelia wanted to laugh at the cruel irony. Instead, she moved closer, forcing him to look at her. "The previous connection I couldn't forget was you, Nicholas. You were the reason I couldn't marry Captain Whitmore. You were the reason I've refused every other suitor. I've been called unmarriageable not because I'm damaged goods, but because I was foolish enough to love you so completely that no one else could compare." His eyes widened. "Amelia, Captain Whitmore was a good man. Kind, honorable, genuinely affectionate. My parents were thrilled by the match. He had enough fortune to ease our difficulties, and he seemed to care for me. I tried, Nicholas, I truly tried to feel something for him, but every time he touched my hand, I thought of you. Every time he spoke kindly, I heard your voice instead. I was going to marry him anyway, out of duty, out of desperation, until the night before we were to finalize the wedding date." She moved to the window, watching rain stream down the glass. "He found me crying in his mother's garden. I told myself they were tears of happiness, but James wasn't a fool. He asked me point blank if I was in love with someone else. I couldn't lie to him, not when he was offering me such genuine affection. So I told him the truth. He ended our engagement the next morning, claiming incompatibility. He protected my reputation even as I broke his heart." "You loved me," Nicholas said quietly. "All that time, you still loved you? Yes. Hated you? Also yes. Both things were true simultaneously. I spent 5 years torn between wanting you back and wishing I'd never met you. She turned to face him. So yes, there was a scandal. Yes, my family became desperate. And yes, when you offered this arrangement, they pressured me to accept because I'd already proven myself incapable of marrying anyone else. But I am not using you as a replacement, Nicholas. You're not the substitute, everyone else was. The silence stretched between them, broken only by thunder and the steady drum of rain. Nicholas moved toward her slowly, as if approaching a wild creature that might bolt. I have no right to be angry, he said. I'm the one who left. I'm the one who broke your heart. Of course you tried to move on. It would have been healthier if you'd succeeded. Would it? Would you have preferred to receive word of my marriage to Captain Whitmore? His jaw clenched. I would have hated it. I would have convinced myself it was for the best while drinking myself into oblivion at my club. I would have attended your wedding with perfect aristocratic composure, and then gone home to write letters I'd never send about how you'd looked in your wedding gown, marrying another man. You're a fool, Nicholas Pemberton. We've established that. We're both fools, wasting 5 years being miserable apart when we could have been miserable together. He laughed, a genuine, surprised sound. That's a grim view of marriage. Is it? At least if we'd been together, we would have been honestly miserable, rather than pretending to be fine while slowly dying inside. Nicholas reached for her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. I don't want us to be miserable, together or otherwise. Neither do I, but I don't know how to bridge this gap between us, how to overcome all the hurt and secrecy and years of absence. Neither do I. He pulled her closer, his free hand cupping her face. But I know I'm tired of pretending, tired of walls and distance and performing. When I read that letter this morning, my first reaction wasn't anger at you. It was rage at the universe that kept us apart long enough for you to try loving someone else. Trying and failing, Amelia corrected softly. I failed spectacularly at forgetting you. Good, he whispered, and then he was kissing her. This wasn't the tentative kiss from the library. This was 5 years of longing and anger and desperate need pouring out in a single moment. Amelia's hands fisted in his coat, pulling him closer, and Nicholas responded by deepening the kiss, his arms coming around her waist to hold her against him. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, the world had shifted on its axis. There was no going back to polite distance now. Not after this. We shouldn't, Nicholas said, even as his forehead rested against hers. We're not married yet. If anyone found out, let them find out. Let them gossip. I'm done caring what society thinks. Amelia, don't you dare pull away now. Don't you dare retreat behind your walls after finally letting me in. He laughed, the sound almost pained. So you're going to be the death of me, the absolute death of my carefully cultivated composure. Good. Composure is overrated. Thunder crashed directly overhead, making them both jump. The lights flickered, and rain intensified, battering the windows with renewed fury. This storm isn't passing, Nicholas observed. I've sent word to close off the east wing. Some of the older windows were leaking. We may be trapped in this wing for the duration. Trapped together. How terrible. Amelia's tone was dry. He smiled, really smiled, transforming his entire face. Come with me. There's something I want to show you. He led her through the study's back door, down a corridor she'd never explored, and up a narrow staircase. They emerged in a tower room, circular and lined with windows on all sides. The storm raged around them, rain streaming down the glass, lightning illuminating the countryside in brilliant flashes. This was my sanctuary as a child, Nicholas explained. When my father's expectations became too much, I'd hide here. He never thought to look in the old watchtower. The room was furnished simply, a desk, a worn leather chair, shelves crammed with books. Unlike the formal perfection of the rest of the house, this space felt lived in, real, honest. I haven't brought anyone here before, Nicholas admitted. Not even Georgiana knew about this place. Amelia understood the significance of the revelation. Why show me now? Because I'm tired of hiding, from you, from myself, from the truth of what I feel. He moved to one of the windows, watching lightning fork across the dark sky. After Georgiana died, I locked myself away. I convinced myself that feeling nothing was safer than risking that kind of pain again. But these past weeks with you have shown me that I'm not actually feeling nothing. I'm just suffocating everything I do feel until it becomes impossible to breathe. Amelia joined him at the window. I understand. I've been doing the same thing. Performing my role perfectly while dying inside. I don't want that for us. I don't want a marriage where we're cordial strangers sharing a house. What do you want? He turned to face her, vulnerability naked in his eyes. I want what we almost had 5 years ago. I want to wake beside you and share real conversation over breakfast. I want to argue with you about books and politics. I want to make you laugh. He stopped, swallowing hard. I want to love you openly, instead of in secret letters I'm too cowardly to send. Amelia's heart was hammering so hard she was certain he could hear it. And the obstacles, your father's legacy, the weight of duty, still there, still real, still terrifying. He took her hands in both of his. But I'm more terrified of living the rest of my life in this frozen half-existence. Georgiana's letter was right. I've been so busy not becoming my father that I've imprisoned myself just as surely as he would have. That ends now. Nicholas, I love you, Amelia Hartfield. I've loved you since that first ball 5 years ago, when you challenged me on Byron's poetry and refused to be intimidated by my title. I loved you when I wrote that terrible letter ending our engagement. I loved you through 5 years of separation. I loved you the moment you stepped out of the carriage 3 weeks ago, even though I tried to convince myself I didn't. And I'll love you until the day I die, whether you choose to forgive me or not. Tears streamed down Amelia's face, mingling with the rain-soaked atmosphere of the storm. You impossibly stubborn man. Of course I forgive you. I forgave you the moment I read those letters. I forgave you the moment I understood what you sacrificed to protect me. And Captain Whitmore was a good man who deserved someone who could love him wholly. I'm sorry I hurt him, but I won't apologize for loving you instead. Nicholas pulled her into his arms, holding her as if she might disappear. I don't deserve you. Probably not. But you're stuck with me anyway. They stood there as the storm raged outside, finally honest, finally open, finally admitting what they'd both known all along, that some loves are too powerful to kill, too deep to forget, too essential to deny. Stay with me tonight, Nicholas whispered against her hair. Here in this tower. Let me hold you while the storm passes. Nothing improper. I won't compromise you before our wedding. But let me just hold you. Let me pretend we're back at the beginning, before everything went wrong. It was scandalous, inappropriate, exactly the kind of thing that would fuel society's gossip if discovered. Amelia didn't care. Yes, she breathed. They settled into the tower room as darkness fell and the storm intensified. Nicholas built up the fire in the small hearth, and they sat together on the worn leather sofa, Amelia tucked against his side, his arm around her shoulders. Tell me about those 5 years, he said softly. I want to know everything. What you did, who you became, how you survived. So she told him. About the first terrible months after receiving his letter, when she'd barely been able to function. About slowly rebuilding herself, developing the armor of perfect composure. About her sister's debut, her father's continued financial struggles, her mother's quiet disappointment. About Captain Whitmore's courtship and the relief she'd felt when it ended, despite the scandal. In turn, Nicholas told her about his father's final years, the old Duke growing more controlling and paranoid as death approached, about inheriting the title at 26 and feeling crushed beneath the weight of it, about discovering his father's secrets after the funeral, and understanding the full extent of the man's cruelty, about the loneliness of being Duke, surrounded by people who wanted things from him, but never knowing who genuinely cared. Hours passed, marked only by the storm's fury outside and the crackling fire within. They talked until their voices grew hoarse, filling in the gaps of 5 lost years, rebuilding the intimacy that had once come so easily. I miss this, Amelia said eventually, her head resting on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. Just talking to you. You're the only person who's ever really listened when I spoke. I missed it too. Missed the way your mind works, the way you challenge me. Are you going to be one of those husbands who's threatened by an intelligent wife? God, I hope not. Please continue challenging me. I'm insufferable when left to my own devices. She laughed, the sound free and genuine. I can work with that. Nicholas's hand stroked her hair gently. Amelia, I need you to understand something. I can't promise this will be easy. I'm damaged in ways I'm still discovering. I'll probably retreat sometimes when I'm scared. I'll struggle with vulnerability. This tower room aside, I'm not naturally open with my feelings. I know. And I'm probably going to push when you need space. I'll demand honesty when you'd prefer privacy. I'm stubborn and opinionated, and I won't always make this easy either. Perfect. We'll be disasters together. Magnificent disasters. He tilted her face up, kissing her softly. 3 weeks until the wedding. Can we make it 3 weeks without killing each other or causing a massive scandal? Unlikely. But we can try. As the storm began to ease toward dawn, they fell asleep there in the tower, wrapped in each other's arms, finally allowing themselves to hope that perhaps, despite everything, they might actually be happy. Outside, the rain slowed to a gentle patter. Inside Ashford Hall, secrets still lurked in shadows, and challenges awaited them. Nicholas's uncle's letter sat on the study desk below, a reminder that society was watching, judging, waiting for them to fail. But for now, in this stolen moment of honesty and intimacy, none of that mattered. They had each other. They had truth. They had love finally spoken aloud instead of hidden in unsent letters. It would have to be enough to face whatever came next. The morning after the storm dawned clear and crystalline, the countryside washed clean and sparkling in the early light. Amelia woke in her own bed. Nicholas had escorted her back to her rooms before the servants began their morning routines. But the memory of the night lingered like a sweet dream. For the first time in 5 years, she felt genuinely hopeful. That optimism lasted exactly 3 hours. She was taking breakfast in the morning room, reviewing fabric samples for the wedding decorations, when Jameson entered with his customary perfect composure, slightly ruffled. Lady Amelia, I apologize for the interruption, but His Grace requests your immediate presence in his study. He said to tell you it's a matter of utmost urgency. The formal tone sent ice through her veins. Something was wrong. She found Nicholas standing behind his desk, his face carved from stone, holding a small wooden box. His eyes, when they met hers, held fury barely contained. "Close the door," he said quietly. Amelia obeyed, her heart hammering. What's happened?" "This arrived by special courier 20 minutes ago." He set the box on the desk. "It was addressed to you, but Jameson, following standard security protocols for unmarked packages, brought it to me first. Given recent threats against the family, we screen all deliveries." "Threats? What threats?" "Anonymous letters I've been receiving for the past month. Nothing specific, just vague warnings about unsuitable matches and consequences for poor decisions. I assumed they were from some disapproving member of society. I didn't take them seriously." His jaw clenched. "I should have." Amelia approached the desk slowly. The box was plain, unadorned except for her name written in an elegant script. "What's inside?" "See for yourself." She opened the box with trembling fingers. Inside, nestled in black velvet, lay a single object, an ornate silver locket on a delicate chain. She recognized it immediately. It had belonged to her mother, a family heirloom passed down through generations. It had been stolen 2 years ago during a break-in at Hartfield Manor. Beneath the locket lay a folded note. Amelia unfolded it with numb fingers and read, "Lady Amelia, consider this a warning. The past is never truly buried, and secrets have a way of surfacing at the most inconvenient moments. Your marriage to the Duke would be problematic for certain interested parties. We strongly suggest you reconsider this arrangement. Should you choose to ignore this advice, we possess information that would destroy not only your reputation, but that of your entire family. Your mother's past, in particular, contains details she has worked very hard to keep hidden. We will contact you again with specific instructions. In the meantime, we return this token as proof of our reach and resources. If we can take a locket from your mother's bedroom, imagine what else we might access. Await further communication. A friend. Amelia's hands shook so badly the letter nearly fell from her grasp. Nicholas steadied her, his touch gentle despite the rage radiating from him. "Someone broke into your family home," he said, his voice dangerously soft. "They stole your mother's locket and kept it for 2 years, waiting for exactly the right moment to use it as leverage. This isn't random harassment, Amelia. This is calculated, organized, and personal." "My mother's past," Amelia whispered. "They're threatening to expose what your father did to her." "Possibly. Or perhaps there's more we don't know." He moved to the window, fists clenched behind his back. "I've already sent for my head of security and my solicitor. I'm also writing to a private investigator I've used before, someone discreet who specializes in uncovering this sort of conspiracy. This is because of me, because you're marrying me. Nicholas, if my presence puts you in danger, don't." He spun around, his eyes blazing. "Don't you dare suggest calling off this wedding. That's exactly what they want. We will not give them the satisfaction." "But no." He crossed to her, taking her face in his hands. "Listen to me, Amelia. I spent 5 years letting fear and threats control my life. I let my father's manipulation keep us apart. I absolutely will not let some anonymous coward do the same thing now. We face this together. We uncover who's behind it, and we make them regret ever threatening you." Despite her terror, warmth bloomed in Amelia's chest. This was the Nicholas she'd fallen in love with, fierce, protective, and absolutely immovable when defending those he cared for. "What do we do?" "First, we secure your family. I'm sending guards to Hartfield Manor immediately. Your mother, father, and sister will be protected around the clock. Second, we investigate. Someone has been planning this for at least 2 years. That takes resources, connections, and motive. We need to identify who benefits from preventing our marriage." A knock interrupted them. Jameson entered, followed by a tall, grizzled man in his 50s with the bearing of a military officer. "Your Grace, Mr. Samuel Crawford has arrived as requested." Nicholas nodded. "Thank you, Jameson." "Crawford, thank you for coming so quickly." The man bowed crisply. "Always at your service, Your Grace." Your message indicated an urgent matter. Nicholas handed him the letter and explained the situation with characteristic precision. Crawford read carefully, his expression growing grimmer with each line. "Blackmail," he said flatly, "and sophisticated blackmail at that. The 2-year waiting period suggests either remarkable patience or a long-game strategy. The reference to interested parties, plural, indicates this likely isn't a lone actor." "Can you identify them?" Amelia asked. "I can try, my lady. I'll need to know who might benefit from preventing this marriage. Who stands to lose if the Duke marries you specifically?" Nicholas began pacing. "Tiens, my uncle, and Lord Pemberton, is next in line to inherit if I die without issue. He's been pressuring me to marry for years, but he had specific candidates in mind, women from families aligned with his political interests. He sent you that letter about Captain Whitmore," Amelia remembered, "warning you about my past. He's also been vocal about preserving the purity of the Ashford line," Nicholas added darkly. "He's never approved of your family's diminished circumstances." Crawford made notes in a small leather-bound book. "Anyone else?" "The Whitmore family might harbor resentment," Amelia offered reluctantly. "I did break their son's heart. Captain Whitmore's mother never forgave me for the scandal." "There's also whoever was involved in my father's attack on your mother," Nicholas said. "If your mother rejected him publicly, there might be others who helped cover up the incident. People who would fear that secret coming to light. Or," Crawford said slowly, "someone who benefits from keeping the two families at odds. Consider this. If the Duke's father did attack Lady Catherine years ago, and if this marriage threatens to unite the families despite that history, who loses power or influence?" The three of them stared at each other as the implications sank in. "Someone in my father's inner circle," Nicholas breathed. "Someone who helped him maintain control through fear and secrets. Someone who's lost their power broker position since his death and sees our marriage as a threat. But that could be dozens of people." Amelia protested. Your father had an entire network of allies and enablers, which is why we need to investigate systematically, Crawford said. Your Grace, I'll need access to your father's papers. Everything, financial records, correspondence, private journals if they exist. My lady, I'll need to speak with your mother about the attack, as difficult as that conversation will be. Amelia's stomach twisted. She doesn't know we know. We'd have to tell her everything. Not necessarily, Nicholas interjected. Crawford can approach it carefully. Perhaps suggest we've learned of a general threat and need information about any past incidents that might be relevant. Another knock. This time Jameson looked genuinely disturbed, a rare crack in his professional facade. Your Grace, Lady Pemberton and her daughter have arrived, unannounced. They're in the drawing room and refuse to leave until they speak with you. Nicholas muttered something decidedly unducal under his breath. My aunt. Perfect timing, as always. Should I attend? Amelia asked. Absolutely. I want you beside me for this, Crawford. Make yourself comfortable in the library. We'll reconvene after I deal with whatever family drama this is. They found Lady Pemberton arranged artfully on the drawing-room sofa, her daughter Cecilia standing by the window in a pose clearly calculated to showcase her figure in the morning light. Both women's eyes sharpened when they saw Amelia enter beside Nicholas. Aunt Margaret, Nicholas said coolly. What an unexpected pleasure. Don't be sarcastic, Nicholas. It's unbecoming. Lady Pemberton's gaze raked over Amelia with undisguised disdain. I've come to discuss this disastrous marriage you're planning. My marriage is none of your concern. It's every Pemberton's concern when you're bringing shame to our family name, marrying this fortune hunter whose family is drowning in debt and scandal. Careful, Nicholas said, his voice dropping to a dangerous register. You're speaking about my future wife. Your future mistake. Nicholas, be reasonable. We've found you perfect candidates, Cecilia among them. Well-bred girls from proper families who would bring honor to the Ashford name. Instead, you choose a woman who was engaged to another man barely a year ago. Cecilia spoke for the first time, her voice syrupy sweet. We only want what's best for you, cousin. Surely you must see how this marriage appears to society, how it damages your reputation. My reputation is my concern, Nicholas replied. And I don't recall asking for your input, Cecilia. But Mamma is right, Cecilia insisted, moving closer with practiced grace. Lady Amelia is lovely, of course, but hardly suitable for a duke. Her family's circumstances, her failed engagement, the rumors about her being unmarriageable. Surely you've heard them all. I've heard a great deal of gossip, Nicholas said flatly. That none of it changes my decision. Lady Pemberton stood, her face flushed with anger. Then you're a fool. That girl is using you to save her bankrupt family. The moment she's Duchess and her father's debts are paid, she'll take lovers and make you a laughingstock. That's enough. Nicholas's shout echoed through the room. Both women flinched. You will not speak of my fiancé that way. Not in my house and not anywhere. Is that clear? Nicholas, I said, is that clear? Lady Pemberton's mouth compressed into a thin line. Your father would be ashamed of you. My father was a cruel, manipulative tyrant who destroyed my sister's life and tormented innocent people for his own amusement. If he would be ashamed of me choosing love over duty, then I count that as a victory. The colour drained from Lady Pemberton's face. How dare you speak of him that way? I dare because it's true. And I'm beginning to wonder, Aunt Margaret, exactly how much you knew about his activities, how many of his secrets you helped keep, how complicit you were in his schemes. Something flickered in the older woman's eyes, fear, guilt, before her expression hardened into cold fury. Come, Cecilia, we're leaving. Clearly your cousin has lost all sense of propriety and family loyalty. Actually, Nicholas said softly, I have a question before you go. Where were you 2 years ago when Hartfield Manor was broken into? Lady Pemberton froze halfway to the door. What? A break-in. Hartfield Manor. 2 years ago. I'm curious where you and Uncle Pemberton were at that time. How should I remember? 2 years is... You were in the country, Cecilia interjected quickly, too quickly. At our estate in Derbyshire. I remember because the weather was terrible, and we were trapped there for weeks. Cecilia, her mother hissed. But the damage was done. Amelia saw Nicholas register the same details she had, the speed of Cecilia's response, the specificity of the memory, the way Lady Pemberton had reacted to her daughter speaking. "Interesting," Nicholas said mildly. "And Lord Pemberton? Was he with you?" "Of course he was," Lady Pemberton snapped. "We were all together. Why this interrogation about a random burglary at a house we have no connection to?" "No connection? Yet you know immediately which break-in I mean?" Despite not remembering the timing initially, the two women exchanged glances. Lady Pemberton drew herself up with icy dignity. "I will not stand here and be accused of whatever you're implying. Come, Cecilia. Your cousin has clearly been corrupted by unsuitable influences." They swept from the room in a rustle of expensive silk. The moment the front door closed behind them, Nicholas turned to Jameson, who'd been standing discreetly in the corner. "Follow them." Discreetly. "I want to know where they go, who they speak to, and if they contact anyone before returning home. At once, Your Grace." Alone finally, Amelia sank onto the sofa. "They're involved, aren't they? Your own family is behind this." "It certainly appears that way. Did you see how quickly Cecilia provided an alibi, and my aunt's reaction when I mentioned the break-in? They knew exactly what I was talking about. But why? What do they gain from preventing our marriage?" Nicholas sat beside her, taking her hand. "If I die without an heir, my uncle inherits everything, the title, the fortune, the estates. He becomes the Duke of Ashford. You're not going to die. Not planning on it, no. But consider this. If I remain unmarried, or if I marry someone they choose, someone they can control, they maintain significant influence over the Ashford legacy. My uncle has been managing certain estate affairs for years. If I marry you, a woman outside their sphere of influence, they lose that power. So they're trying to scare me away, or discredit you so thoroughly that I'm forced to break the engagement to save my reputation." His grip on her hand tightened. "They underestimate my stubbornness." A commotion in the hallway interrupted them. Raised voices, Jameson trying to maintain order. And then the door burst open. A young man in travel-stained clothes stumbled in, supported by two footmen. His face was bruised, his lips split, and he clutched his ribs as if they pained him. "Your Grace," he gasped, "I'm Thomas Harley, one of your tenants from the East Fields. I was attacked on the road this morning. They said—" He winced, struggling for breath. "They said to deliver a message to you. Said the Duke needs to learn that some marriages bring more danger than they're worth. Said next time it won't be just a beating. Said next time they'll go after the lady directly." Amelia felt the blood drain from her face. Nicholas was on his feet immediately, calling for the physician, demanding details. But she barely heard him through the roaring in her ears. This wasn't just blackmail anymore. This was violence. This was a genuine threat against her life. And whoever was behind it was willing to hurt innocent people to make their point. Nicholas crouched before her, his hands framing her face. "Amelia, look at me, look at me." She focused on his grey eyes, seeing fear and fury and fierce protectiveness. "I will not let them hurt you," he said with absolute conviction. "I will find whoever is behind this, and I will make them answer for every threat, every letter, every bruise on that young man's face. You are mine to protect, and I will burn the world down before I let anyone harm you. Do you understand?" She nodded, not trusting her voice. "Good. Now, we're going to increase security immediately. Guards outside your rooms at night, escorts whenever you leave the house. Crawford will work around the clock to identify these people. And we're moving the wedding up. What? 2 weeks. We're getting married in 2 weeks instead of 3. Once you're my Duchess, you'll have the full protection of the Ashford name and resources. And more importantly, their leverage disappears. Whatever secrets they threaten to expose, we'll weather them together." "Nicholas, are you sure?" "I've never been more certain of anything in my life. We face this together, remember? No more running. No more letting threats control our choices." Amelia looked at this man, stubborn, damaged, and absolutely determined to protect her, and felt love surge through her with overwhelming force. "Together," she agreed. 2 weeks. 2 weeks, he confirmed. Then, softer, "I love you, Amelia Hartfield." And I'll prove it by making sure you live to become Amelia Pemberton, Duchess of Ashford." As physicians tended to the wounded tenant and Crawford began his investigation in earnest, Amelia realized that their story had shifted from romance to something far more dangerous. Someone wanted to destroy their happiness badly enough to orchestrate violence, and they had 2 weeks to uncover the conspiracy before standing at the altar. Assuming they survived that long, the game had become deadly, and the stakes had never been higher. 10 days. That's how long remained until the wedding, now hastily rescheduled and shrouded in an atmosphere of tense anticipation. Ashford Hall had transformed into something resembling a fortress. Guards patrolled the grounds day and night. Every visitor was scrutinized, and Amelia couldn't walk from her bedroom to the library without an armed escort shadowing her steps. She should have felt safe. Instead, she felt like a prisoner. Crawford's investigation had yielded disturbing results. Through careful examination of financial records, he'd traced a series of payments from Lord Pemberton's accounts to various unsavory individuals, men known for theft, intimidation, and worse. The break-in at Hartfield Manor 2 years ago had indeed been orchestrated by Nicholas's uncle, as had the anonymous threatening letters and the attack on the tenant. But the conspiracy went deeper than simple greed. Crawford had uncovered correspondence suggesting that Lord Pemberton had been one of the late Duke's closest confidants, a man who'd helped cover up numerous scandals over the years, including the attack on Amelia's mother. He'd benefited handsomely from his position as the Duke's fixer, receiving generous consulting fees that had funded his lavish lifestyle. When the old Duke died and Nicholas inherited, those payments stopped. Nicholas ran his estates honestly, with no need for a man skilled in concealing crimes. Lord Pemberton's influence had evaporated overnight, leaving him bitter, resentful, and desperate to regain his former power. The solution, from his twisted perspective, was simple. Prevent Nicholas from marrying anyone outside Pemberton's control. If he could force Nicholas to marry Cecilia instead, he'd regain his position of influence. And if Nicholas refused to be manipulated, well, accidents could be arranged. With Nicholas dead and no heir, Lord Pemberton would become Duke, and all his problems would be solved. It was a scheme built on desperation, greed, and the arrogant belief that he could get away with it. He'd been wrong. That morning, Nicholas had travelled to London with Crawford and a magistrate to present their evidence. Lord Pemberton had been arrested, along with 2 men he'd hired to carry out his threats. Lady Pemberton and Cecilia had been questioned extensively, but ultimately released. There was no evidence they'd been directly involved, though their knowledge of the scheme was heavily suspected. Nicholas was expected to return by evening. In the meantime, Amelia sat in the drawing room with her mother, who'd insisted on visiting despite the danger. Lady Catherine Hartfield looked older than her years, worn down by financial stress and the weight of secrets she'd carried for decades. "Mama," Amelia began carefully, "there's something I need to tell you. Something about the late Duke and an incident from your past." Her mother's teacup rattled against its saucer. "I don't know what you mean." "Mama, please, we know. Nicholas and I know what his father did to you. We found evidence among his papers." The colour drained from Catherine's face. For a long moment she sat frozen, and Amelia feared she'd refuse to acknowledge it. Then slowly, her mother set down her tea and folded her hands in her lap with deliberate precision. "How much do you know?" "Enough to understand that he attacked you, that you rejected him, and he sought revenge, that his vendetta against our family was personal." Catherine closed her eyes. "It was 28 years ago. I was newly married to your father, barely 20 years old. We attended a house party at the Pemberton estate. The Duke cornered me in the library one evening. He was forceful, convinced that his title and power meant he could have whatever he wanted." Amelia's hands clenched. "Mama," I fought him off, slapped him hard enough to leave a mark, threatened to scream if he didn't release me. "He did, but the look in his eyes—" Catherine shuddered. "Pure hatred. He swore that I would regret humiliating him, that he would destroy everything I loved." "Why didn't you tell anyone?" "Tell who? The Duke of Ashford, one of the most powerful men in England. Who would believe a young woman's word against his—" Catherine's voice broke. Your father wanted to call him out, challenge him to a duel. I begged him not to. The Duke would have killed him and been within his legal rights to do so, so we said nothing, and I spent the next 28 years watching him chip away at our family piece by piece. Your father's business failures, Amelia realized, his debts, the scandal with Uncle Richard, all orchestrated or exploited by the Duke. He couldn't attack me directly without revealing his own attempted assault, so he destroyed us slowly, methodically, through unfortunate circumstances and bad luck. Catherine looked at her daughter with haunted eyes. And now you're marrying his son, his heir, the man who inherited everything that monster built. Nicholas is nothing like his father. Are you certain? Power corrupts, Amelia. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. The Duke of Ashford commands wealth and influence beyond measure. How long before that changes him? It won't. He's already proven he'll choose love over power. He gave me up 5 years ago to protect us from his father's threats. He spent the past 2 weeks fighting his own family to keep me safe. He's not his father, Mama. He's the man who loves me enough to defy everything he was raised to be. Catherine studied her daughter's face for a long moment. You truly love him. With everything I am. Then I won't stand in your way. But Amelia. Her mother reached across to grip her hand tightly. Be careful. Watch for signs of his father's cruelty. And if you ever see them, if he ever raises his hand to you or uses his power to control you, promise me you'll leave. Promise me you won't sacrifice yourself the way Georgiana did. I promise, Mama, but I don't think I'll need to. Nicholas is determined to be different. A commotion in the hallway announced Nicholas's return. He strode into the drawing room, still wearing his travel cloak, his face grave but relieved. It's done, he announced without preamble. My uncle is in custody. The magistrate has enough evidence to ensure he'll face trial. The men he hired have already confessed in exchange for lighter sentences. Thank God, Amelia breathed. Nicholas noticed her mother and bowed respectfully. Lady Catherine, I'm sorry you had to learn of this ugliness, and I'm sorry, profoundly sorry, for what my father did to you. Catherine stood slowly, studying him with the same intensity she'd used on Amelia. But you knew about his attack. I discovered it after his death, among his private papers. He kept records, a sick trophy collection of people he'd harmed. Nicholas's voice was tight with suppressed rage. I wanted to tell you, to apologize, but I didn't know how. I was ashamed of his actions, ashamed that his blood runs in my veins. Blood doesn't determine character, Catherine said quietly. Actions do, and your actions toward my daughter suggest you're nothing like him. I'm trying not to be. Every day, I'm trying. That's all any of us can do. Catherine moved toward the door, then paused. Your Grace, I won't pretend I'm entirely comfortable with this marriage. My history with your family is complicated, but I can see that you love Amelia, and I know she loves you, so I give you my blessing with one condition. Name it. Make her happy, not comfortable, not secure, not merely content, happy. Give her the life of joy and partnership your father denied so many people. Can you do that? Nicholas met her gaze steadily. I can try, and I will spend the rest of my life trying. Catherine nodded once, satisfied, and left them alone. Nicholas sagged into a chair, exhaustion written across his features. It's over. The threats, the conspiracy, all of it. We can finally breathe. Amelia sat beside him, taking his hand. Can we, Nicholas? Your uncle nearly succeeded. If Crawford hadn't uncovered the evidence, if you hadn't been suspicious of your aunt's visit. But we did uncover it. We stopped him. This time. But what about next time? What about all the other people out there who resent our marriage, who think I'm not good enough for you, who want to see us fail? Let them think what they want. Their opinions don't matter. Don't they? Amelia stood, pacing to the window. Your uncle's arrest will be in every newspaper by tomorrow. Society will be scandalized. Some will sympathize with us, but others will say we brought this on ourselves by defying convention. The gossip will be relentless. I don't care about gossip. You should. You're the Duke of Ashford. Your reputation affects your business relationships, your political influence, your ability to help your tenants and manage your estates. If society turns against you because of me, then society can go to hell. Nicholas rose and crossed to her, gripping her shoulders. Amelia, what are you really saying? Are you getting cold feet about the wedding? I'm saying maybe everyone was right. Maybe we are from incompatible worlds. Maybe loving each other isn't enough when the entire structure of society is designed to keep us apart. You're frightened. That's understandable after everything that's happened. I'm being realistic. Nicholas, in 10 days, I'm going to become Duchess of Ashford. Do you know what that means? Endless social obligations. Managing a household of 50 servants, hosting events for hundreds of people, representing your family to the highest levels of society. What if I can't do it? What if I embarrass you? You could never embarrass me. You don't know that. I don't know the right fork to use at a formal dinner. I don't understand half the social protocols. I'll make mistakes, say the wrong thing, offend important people, and I'll defend you every single time. He cupped her face in his hands. Amelia, you're spiraling. Tell me what this is really about. The dam broke. I'm terrified. I'm terrified that I'll fail you, that I'll be a terrible duchess, that everyone will look at me and see exactly what your aunt called me, a fortune hunter who trapped you into marriage. I'm terrified that one day you'll wake up and realize you made a mistake choosing me. Never, Nicholas said fiercely. Amelia, listen to me. I don't need a perfect duchess. I need you. The woman who challenges me, who makes me laugh, who sees past my title to who I actually am. If you use the wrong fork, we'll laugh about it. If you offend stuffy aristocrats, they probably deserved it. If you make mistakes, we'll fix them together. But no buts. You're not doing this alone. We're partners, equals. I don't want you to transform yourself into some idealized version of what you think a duchess should be. I want you exactly as you are. Tears streamed down Amelia's face. I'm so scared of losing you, of losing this. It feels too good to be real. I know, I'm scared too. Every day I wake up terrified that something will happen to take you away from me again. But we can't let fear control us. We tried that 5 years ago, remember? It didn't work out well. Despite her tears, Amelia laughed weakly. That's an understatement. So, here's what we're going to do. In 10 days, we're getting married at St. George's. You're going to walk down that aisle in whatever dress makes you feel beautiful. I'm going to stand there trying not to cry. We'll say our vows in front of God and half of London society, and then we're going to build a life together, messy, imperfect, occasionally scandalous, but ours. What if I can't be the duchess you need? You already are. The moment you agreed to marry me, despite everything, the secrets, the danger, the family drama, you proved you're exactly what I need. Someone brave enough to love me anyway. Amelia buried her face in his chest, letting him hold her as she cried out 5 years of fear and uncertainty. Nicholas's arms tightened around her, his chin resting on top of her head, and she felt some of her panic ease. I love you, she whispered against his coat. I love you so much it terrifies me. Good. Love should be a little terrifying. It means it matters. They stood there as afternoon faded into evening, holding each other, drawing strength from each other. Outside, guards patrolled the grounds. In London, Nicholas's uncle sat in a cell contemplating his spectacular failure, and across England, society was already beginning to gossip about the Ashford wedding that had nearly ended in tragedy. But in that moment, none of it mattered. They had each other. They had truth. They had love that had survived separation, threats, and the weight of impossible expectations. 10 days remained until their wedding. 10 days to finalize arrangements, to prepare for the scrutiny that would follow them the rest of their lives, to shore up their defenses against a world determined to see them fail. But they would face it together, not as duke and fortune hunter, not as victim and protector, but as partners who'd chosen each other despite every obstacle. Amelia? Nicholas said softly. Yes, thank you for staying, for not running when things got difficult. Where would I go? You're stuck with me now. He laughed, the sound warm and genuine. The best news I've heard all day. As darkness fell over Ashford Hall, they remained in the drawing room, talking through their fears, planning their future, and slowly learning to trust that perhaps, just perhaps, They could actually build the happy ending they'd been denied 5 years ago. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. Society would judge them. Challenges would arise. But they'd face everything together, armed with honesty, commitment, and a love that had proven stronger than fear. 10 days until the wedding. 10 days until Amelia Hartfield became Amelia Pemberton, Duchess of Ashford. She couldn't wait. The morning of the wedding dawned grey and uncertain, storm clouds gathering over London like an omen. Amelia stood at the window of her rooms at the Pemberton townhouse, watching rain begin to spatter against the glass, and wondered if the weather was trying to tell her something. "Don't even think it," her sister Charlotte said from behind her. "Rain on your wedding day is good luck." Everyone knows that. Everyone says that to make brides feel better when their outdoor ceremonies are ruined. Well, you're getting married in a church anyway, so the weather is irrelevant. Charlotte came to stand beside her, squeezing her hand. "Are you nervous?" "Terrified," Amelia admitted. "What if I trip walking down the aisle? What if I forget my vows? What if you marry the man you love and live happily ever after?" Charlotte smiled. "Stop looking for disasters, Amelia. You've had enough real ones to last a lifetime. Today is about joy." Amelia wanted to believe her. But as she turned from the window and saw the wedding dress laid out on the bed, ivory silk with delicate lace and seed pearls, a creation of breathtaking beauty that Nicholas had commissioned specially for her, she felt the weight of what this day meant. In a few hours, she would become Duchess of Ashford. She would take on responsibilities she'd barely begun to understand. She would step into the role that had destroyed Georgiana, that had been used as a weapon by the old Duke, that came with expectations she wasn't sure she could meet. But she would also become Nicholas's wife, his partner, his equal in ways that title and position couldn't diminish. That had to be enough. The morning passed in a blur of preparation. Her mother arrived to help her dress, tears already threatening despite the early hour. Mary styled her hair in an elaborate arrangement of curls and braids, weaving in tiny white roses. The dress slipped over her head like a dream, fitting perfectly, transforming her into someone she barely recognized. When she finally stood before the mirror, fully dressed with her veil arranged, even Charlotte gasped. "Amelia, you're magnificent." She didn't feel magnificent. She felt like a girl playing dress-up, pretending to be someone important. But the woman in the mirror looked confident, elegant, every inch a future duchess. Perhaps she could become that woman. Perhaps the performance would eventually become reality. A knock at the door announced her father's arrival. Lord Hartfield had aged considerably in the past months, the stress of their financial troubles carved into lines around his eyes. But when he saw his daughter, he smiled with genuine warmth. "My dear girl, you're beautiful." "Thank you, Papa." She kissed his cheek carefully, mindful of her veil. "Are you ready?" "The question is, are you?" He offered his arm. "Because once we walk through those church doors, there's no turning back. If you have any doubts, any concerns, now is the time to voice them." Amelia thought about that, about the past 5 years of loneliness and heartbreak, about the letters Nicholas had written but never sent, about the conspiracy they'd uncovered and defeated together, about the way he looked at her when he thought she wasn't watching, as if she was something precious, miraculous, impossible. "No doubts," she said firmly. "Let's go make me a duchess." The carriage ride to St. George's took forever and no time at all. When they arrived, Amelia saw the crowds gathered outside, London society in all its glittering splendor, eager to witness the scandal-touched wedding of the season. She recognized faces from the engagement ball, saw people she knew had whispered about her, spotted Lord and Lady Whitmore standing stiffly apart from the main crowd. But she also saw Nicholas's tenants, who'd travelled from the countryside to support their Duke. She saw servants from Ashford Hall, beaming with pride. She saw Crawford standing like a watchful sentinel, ensuring nothing would disrupt this day. The church bells began to ring. "Jules, that's our cue," her father said, squeezing her arm. Inside St. George's, hundreds of candles blazed, transforming the ancient church into something magical. Every pew was filled with aristocrats. All turned to watch as the doors opened, and Amelia appeared at the end of the impossibly long aisle. And there, at the altar, stood Nicholas, He wore formal morning dress, his dark hair perfectly styled, his bearing every inch the Duke. But his eyes held such naked emotion that Amelia's breath caught. Love, fear, hope, wonder, all written plainly across his features for anyone who cared to look. He wasn't hiding anymore. He was letting the world see exactly how he felt about her. The organ began to play. Her father led her forward, each step bringing her closer to the moment that would change everything. She was dimly aware of faces on either side. Her mother crying, Charlotte beaming, Nicholas's Aunt Margaret looking sour, countless strangers assessing and judging. But her focus remained on Nicholas. On the way, his hands clenched and unclenched at his sides, on the slight tremor in his shoulders, on the moment when she finally reached him, and his eyes filled with tears he didn't bother to hide. "You came," he whispered, so quietly only she could hear. "Where else would I be?" Her father placed her hand in Nicholas's, and she felt the rightness of it, the way their fingers intertwined automatically, perfectly, as if they'd been designed to fit together exactly this way. The Archbishop of Canterbury began the ceremony, his sonorous voice filling the vast space. Amelia heard the words as if from a great distance. Her entire world narrowed to Nicholas's grey eyes and the feel of his hand in hers. If any person can show just cause why these two may not be joined in holy matrimony, let them speak now or forever hold their peace. The traditional challenge, usually a formality, ignored by all present. But this time a voice rang out from the back of the church. "I object." The congregation erupted in shocked murmurs. Amelia spun around, her heart plummeting, to see a man striding down the aisle, tall, distinguished, with silver hair and aristocratic bearing. She didn't recognize him, but she felt Nicholas tense beside her. "Hey, Lord Ashford," Nicholas said coldly. "My grandfather, I was told you were too ill to attend. Reports of my infirmity have been greatly exaggerated." The old man reached the altar, his keen eyes assessing Amelia with disturbing intensity. "I came because I won't stand by and watch this family make another catastrophic mistake. Grandfather, this is neither the time nor the place. It's exactly the time and place. Before you bind yourself to this girl, you need to know the truth about her family. About the secret her mother has kept for 28 years. Catherine Hartfield stood up in her pew, her face white as death. "No, please, no." "What secret?" Amelia demanded, though dread was already pooling in her stomach. Lord Ashford smiled without warmth. "Your mother rejected my son's advances 28 years ago. What she never told anyone, what she's hidden all this time, is that she was already pregnant when she married your father, pregnant with another man's child." The church fell into stunned silence. Amelia felt the floor tilt beneath her feet. "That's impossible," she whispered. "I was born 10 months after my parents married." "You were born 7 months after the wedding," Lord Ashford corrected. "Your mother concealed the early birth, claimed you were fragile and small, but you were perfectly healthy, just proof of her indiscretion." "That's a lie," Catherine cried. "A vicious, cruel lie." "Is it? I have the midwife's testimony. I have medical records. Your daughter was conceived before your marriage, Lady Catherine, which means—" He turned to Nicholas with terrible satisfaction. "Which means the woman you're about to marry is baseborn, the daughter of an unknown father, raised as a Hartfield through deception. You cannot marry her, Nicholas. It would taint the Ashford bloodline with common bastard blood." The ugly word echoed through the church. Amelia heard gasps, whispers, the rustling of fabric as people shifted to see her reaction. Humiliation burned through her, but beneath it was a deeper pain. The possibility that everything she'd believed about herself was a lie. She turned to her mother, desperate. "Mama, tell him he's lying." Catherine's silence was answer enough. Her face crumpled, tears streaming down her cheeks, and Amelia knew with horrible certainty, that it was true. "Mama," she breathed, "who was my father?" "I can't," Catherine sobbed. "I can't say. It doesn't matter. You're my daughter." "That's all that matters." "It matters to the Ashford line," Lord Ashford said coldly. "My grandson cannot marry a woman of uncertain parentage. The scandal alone would destroy us. Nicholas, I'm giving you a chance to step back from this mistake with dignity intact. End this ceremony now before you bind yourself to disgrace." Amelia stood frozen, her world shattering around her. She was illegitimate, baseborn, the daughter of some unknown man her mother refused to name. Everything she'd thought she knew about her identity was a lie. She looked at Nicholas, waiting for him to pull away, to agree with his grandfather, to realize he couldn't possibly marry her now. The Archbishop had stopped speaking, waiting for direction. The congregation held its collective breath. Nicholas's hand tightened on hers. "Grandfather," he said quietly, "thank you for traveling all this way to share this information. It must have been a tremendous effort given your advanced age and failing health." "Nicholas, you can't seriously be considering—" "I'm not considering anything. I'm marrying Amelia." He turned to the Archbishop. "Please continue with the ceremony." "Nicholas," Lord Ashford's voice cracked like a whip, "think about what you're doing. Your duty to this family. My duty is to marry the woman I love. Her parentage, legitimate or otherwise, changes nothing about who she is or how I feel about her." Nicholas addressed the entire congregation now, his voice carrying to every corner of the church. "Lady Amelia Hartfield is brilliant, courageous, and honorable. She's survived scandal, threats, and attacks with grace and strength. If society wants to judge her for circumstances of her birth that she had no control over, then society is welcome to its opinion. I know who she is, and I choose her. You're making a mistake. The only mistake I made was wasting 5 years without her. I won't waste another moment." Nicholas turned to Amelia, and despite everything, the scandal, the revelation, the hundreds of eyes watching, he smiled. "Unless you've changed your mind. I would understand if you wanted to walk away from all this ugliness." Amelia looked at this man who'd just publicly defied his grandfather, dismissed society's judgment, and chosen her despite learning she was illegitimate. This man who'd loved her through separation, danger, and impossible obstacles. "Continue the ceremony," she said to the Archbishop, her voice steady despite her tears. "I'm marrying this stubborn, impossible man even if the entire world objects." Lord Ashford made a sound of disgust and stormed from the church. Several guests followed him, those most concerned with bloodlines and propriety, but most remained, watching with expressions ranging from shock to admiration as the Archbishop resumed the ceremony. "Nicholas Pemberton, Duke of Ashford, do you take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." No hesitation, no doubt. "Lady Amelia Hartfield, do you take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" "I do." Her voice rang clear and strong. "Then by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. What God has joined together, let no man tear asunder." Nicholas pulled her into his arms and kissed her, deep and claiming, in front of the Archbishop and half of London society. It was scandalous, improper, and absolutely perfect. When they finally broke apart, the church erupted in applause, some shocked, some delighted, all knowing they'd just witnessed a wedding that would be discussed for years to come. As they walked back down the aisle together, Amelia saw her mother standing in her pew, tears streaming down her face. She paused, pulling Nicholas with her. "Mamma, we're not finished discussing this. But whatever happened, whoever my father was, you're my mother. That will never change." Catherine nodded, too overcome to speak. Outside the church, rain was falling steadily, but Amelia didn't care. She was Amelia Pemberton now, Duchess of Ashford, wife to the most stubborn, wonderful man in England. "Well," Nicholas said as they stood under the church portico, watching rain drench the departing guests, "that was certainly dramatic. Sorry about my grandfather. Sorry about my illegitimacy." "Don't be. It's rather exciting, actually. I married a woman of mystery. For all we know, you could be secretly a princess. Despite everything," Amelia laughed. "More likely the daughter of a stable hand. Still counts as exotic parentage in my book." He pulled her close, heedless of the watching crowd. "Are you all right? I know that revelation was devastating, humiliating, life-altering." She leaned against him. "Yes, all of those things, but also strangely freeing. I've spent my whole life trying to be the perfect lady from the perfect family. Now everyone knows we're not perfect, and the world didn't end. No, it didn't, though we'll definitely be the scandal of the season. Good. I was worried our wedding might be boring. Nicholas laughed, the sound full of genuine joy. Nothing about you is boring, Duchess. Nothing ever will be. They climbed into the carriage that would take them to the wedding breakfast, just beginning to process everything that had happened. The revelation about Amelia's parentage would require careful handling. Her mother would need to explain, answers would need to be found, and society's judgment would have to be weathered. But they would face it together, as husband and wife, as partners who'd proven that love could survive secrets, scandals, and the weight of impossible expectations. The storm that had threatened all morning finally broke in earnest, rain pounding against the carriage roof. But inside, wrapped in each other's arms, Amelia and Nicholas were already planning their future. Messy, imperfect, occasionally scandalous, but entirely theirs. 3 months had passed since the wedding that scandalized London. 3 months since Amelia had learned the truth about her birth. 3 months since Nicholas had publicly chosen her despite everything society deemed important. Autumn had arrived at Ashford Hall, painting the countryside in shades of amber and crimson. Amelia stood in the tower room, their tower room now, transformed from Nicholas's childhood sanctuary into a private retreat where they could escape the demands of title and duty, and watched leaves dance on the wind beyond the windows. She heard Nicholas's footsteps on the stairs before he appeared, carrying a tea tray, and wearing an expression of determined cheerfulness that immediately made her suspicious. "What have you done?" she asked. "Why do you assume I've done something?" "Because you're bringing me tea personally instead of ringing for servants. You only do that when you're about to tell me something I won't like." He laughed, setting down the tray. 3 months married, and you already know me too well. Very well, your mother is here. She arrived an hour ago and is currently in the drawing room, looking nervous. Amelia's stomach tightened. She'd been avoiding this conversation for 3 months, burying herself in learning her duties as Duchess, throwing herself into estate management and social obligations. Anything to avoid confronting the truth about her parentage. "I'm not ready to see her." "I know. But she's been asking to speak with you for weeks. And I think—" Nicholas moved behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "I think you need answers. The not knowing is eating at you." He was right. Damn him. For 3 months, she'd wondered who her real father was. Every time she looked in the mirror, she searched for features that didn't come from Catherine, tried to imagine the man whose blood ran through her veins. The uncertainty was a constant ache she couldn't ignore. What if the truth is worse than not knowing? Then we'll face it together, just like we've faced everything else. He kissed the top of her head. "I'll be there with you if you want. Or I can make myself scarce. Whatever you need." Amelia leaned back against him, drawing strength from his solid presence. "Stay with me. I might need you to prevent me from saying something I'll regret, or to hold you if you need to cry. That too." They found Catherine in the drawing room, standing by the window in almost the exact spot where Amelia had been moments before. She turned when they entered, and Amelia was struck by how much older her mother looked. The past months had been hard on all of them. "Amelia." "Nicholas, thank you for seeing me." "Mama." Amelia sat, Nicholas settling beside her, his hand finding hers immediately. "You said you needed to speak with me. I owe you the truth, all of it. I should have told you years ago, but I was afraid." Catherine's voice broke. "I was afraid of exactly what happened, that you'd look at me differently, that you'd hate me for the deception. I don't hate you, Mama. I'm confused, hurt, angry, but I don't hate you." Catherine nodded, tears already falling. "Your father, your real father, was a man named Jonathan Sheffield. He was the second son of a baron, charming, educated, and utterly unsuitable for marriage because he had no fortune and no prospects. You loved him. Desperately. We met when I was 19, before I was formally out in society. He was serving as a tutor to my younger brother. We fell in love despite knowing it was hopeless. My family would never permit me to marry someone so far beneath my station." Catherine twisted her hands together. "We were foolish, reckless. We thought love would be enough. You got pregnant." "Yes, when I discovered it, Jonathan wanted to elope. He was prepared to take me away, find work somewhere, build a life together despite having nothing. Catherine's smile was sad. He was so brave, so certain we could overcome any obstacle, but I was terrified of poverty, of disappointing my family, of raising a child without resources or protection. So you married my Lord Hartfield instead. Your father knew. I told him everything before accepting his proposal. He was older, established, looking for a wife to help manage his household. He agreed to marry me quickly, to claim you as his own, in exchange for my family's political connections. Catherine looked directly at Amelia. He's been a good father to you, Amelia. Perhaps not the warm, demonstrative parent you deserved, but he's cared for you, provided for you, never treated you as anything other than his daughter. What happened to Jonathan Sheffield? Nicholas asked quietly. He left England. I never saw him again. Catherine's voice was barely a whisper. I heard years later that he died of fever in India. He never married. Never had other children. He spent his life alone because I was too cowardly to choose him. Amelia felt tears streaming down her own face now. You chose safety over love. I chose survival. I was 19, pregnant, terrified. I made what I thought was the practical decision. Catherine moved closer, kneeling before her daughter. But I've regretted it every day since. Not because I regret you, never that. You're the best thing that ever happened to me. But because I wonder what kind of life we might have had if I'd been braver. Like I was 5 years ago, Nicholas said softly. Choosing duty over love, choosing safety over happiness, making that a practical decision. Yes. Catherine looked at him with understanding. And suffering for it. I watched you make the same mistake I had, Nicholas. I saw how it destroyed both of you. That's why I gave my blessing for this marriage, despite my complicated history with your family, because I didn't want Amelia to spend her life regretting what might have been. Amelia stood, pulling her mother up with her. I'm angry that you lied to me for 25 years. I'm hurt that you let me believe I was someone I'm not, but I understand why you did it. You were young and scared and trying to survive in a world that gave women so few choices. Can you forgive me? Eventually. Not today. Maybe not for a while. But eventually. Amelia embraced her mother, feeling Catherine shake with sobs. You're still my mother. That hasn't changed. They held each other while Nicholas discreetly moved to the window, giving them privacy. When they finally separated, Catherine wiped her eyes and managed a watery smile. There's something else you should know. Jonathan kept letters, all the letters I wrote him before we separated. After he died, they were sent to me by his solicitor. I've brought them for you, if you want them. They're in the carriage, letters. Everything I felt for him, everything I couldn't say aloud. Our hopes, our dreams, our plans for the life we never got to live. I thought you might want to know him through those words, to understand where you came from. Amelia looked at Nicholas, who nodded encouragingly. I'd like that, Mamma, thank you. Catherine departed shortly after, promising to visit again soon, leaving Amelia and Nicholas alone with a leather-bound portfolio of letters spanning nearly 3 decades. They returned to the tower room and spent the afternoon reading together. Catherine's letters revealed a passionate, romantic girl desperately in love with a man society deemed unworthy. Jonathan's responses, for Catherine had kept those too, showed a thoughtful, intelligent man who'd loved Catherine enough to let her go when she chose security over him. He sounds like he was a good man, Nicholas observed, reading over Amelia's shoulder. He does. Kind, educated, principled. Amelia touched a faded sketch of Jonathan's face that Catherine had included. I have his eyes and his handwriting. Look at the way he forms his letters. It's almost identical to mine. You have his sense of honor too, I think. The willingness to sacrifice for those you love. Is that a compliment or criticism? Both. Nicholas pulled her into his lap, the letters scattered around them. You're so like him, choosing others over yourself, putting duty before desire. Except when you married me, then you chose love despite the consequences. And look how that turned out. Scandal, illegitimacy revealed, society gossiping. And 3 months of the happiest marriage I could have imagined. I wake up beside you every morning. I fall asleep holding you every night. I share my thoughts, my fears, my ridiculous poetry attempts. Those are truly terrible. They are. But you laugh at them anyway, and somehow that makes everything better. He kissed her softly. I don't care if you're the daughter of a baron's son or a stable hand or the King of France. You're mine, and I'm yours, and that's all that matters. Amelia leaned into him, feeling the last of her anger and confusion ease. I spent 3 months afraid that discovering the truth would change everything, that knowing I'm not really a Hartfield would somehow make me less worthy of being a Pemberton. And now I realize that I'm exactly who I've always been. Jonathan Sheffield's daughter, yes, but also Catherine's daughter, the woman you married, the Duchess of Ashford. My bloodline doesn't define me. My choices do. And I chose you. I chose this life. I chose to be brave enough to love you despite every obstacle. Thank God for your bravery. Nicholas stood, carrying her with him toward the door. Now come with me. I have something to show you. Nicholas, what are you planning? You'll see. He led her through the house and out to the gardens, where the autumn afternoon was fading into golden twilight. In the rose garden, where they'd first talked honestly after the engagement ball, a small ceremony had been set up. Chairs arranged in a circle, candles lit despite the early hour, and a minister waiting with a patient smile. What is this? Amelia breathed. Our real wedding. Nicholas took both her hands. The church ceremony was beautiful, but tainted by drama and scandal. I wanted us to have a moment that was just ours. No society watching, no family drama, no revelations. Just you, me, and vows we actually mean. Tears blurred Amelia's vision. You planned this. With help from Mary and Jameson, the entire household is hiding in the windows watching, so we're not completely alone. But it's as close to private as a duke and duchess can get. The minister cleared his throat gently. Shall we begin? They stood in the rose garden as twilight deepened, speaking vows they'd written themselves. Nicholas promised to always choose her, to never let duty come before love, to be brave enough to be vulnerable. Amelia promised to challenge him, support him, and build a life defined by their choices rather than their bloodlines. When they exchanged rings, simple gold bands engraved with each other's names, Amelia felt something settle in her chest. This was their real beginning, not the dramatic ceremony at St. George's, but this quiet moment in a garden where they'd first begun to be honest with each other. I now pronounce you again husband and wife, the minister said with a smile. As you may kiss your bride and your grace. Nicholas pulled her close, and the kiss tasted like promises kept and futures yet to be written. Afterward, they walked through the gardens as full darkness fell and stars appeared overhead. The house glowed with warm light behind them, and Amelia could hear music drifting from the ballroom, the household celebrating their private ceremony with their own party. I have one more surprise, Nicholas said, leading her to a bench beneath an old oak tree. I've been working on something for months. It's not quite finished but I want you to have it now. He handed her a leather-bound book. When she opened it, she found pages and pages of his handwriting, the letters he'd written her over the past 5 years, copied out and bound together. But there was more, new letters, written since their wedding. Letters describing his daily thoughts, his love for her, his hopes for their future, and blank pages at the back waiting to be filled. I'm going to keep writing to you, Nicholas explained. Not letters I hide away, but letters I share. A journal of our life together. And when I fill this book, I'll start another and another until we have shelves full of our story. Amelia pressed the book to her chest, overwhelmed. It's perfect. You're perfect. I'm really not, but I'm trying to be the man you deserve. You already are. They sat beneath the oak tree until late into the night, talking about everything and nothing. About children they hoped to have someday. About changes they wanted to make to the estate. About the scandal that was already fading as London society moved on to newer gossip. About Jonathan Sheffield and the life he'd never got to live, and how they would honour his memory by living theirs fully. Do you think we'll always be this happy? Amelia asked eventually. Probably not. We'll fight, disagree, drive each other crazy. Life will throw challenges at us, more scandals, more family drama, more obstacles. Nicholas pulled her closer. But we'll face all of it together, and we'll choose each other, every single day, no matter what comes. Every single day, Amelia agreed. As they finally returned to the house, walking hand in hand through gardens they'd learned to call home, Amelia reflected on the journey that had brought them here, the heartbreak of 5 years ago, the conspiracy they'd uncovered, the revelation about her birth, the dramatic wedding, and finally this, peace, partnership, and love, reclaimed from the ashes of duty and fear. They weren't perfect, their families were complicated, their pasts were messy, and society would probably always whisper about the Duchess with questionable parentage who'd trapped the Duke into marriage. But they were happy, genuinely, deeply, impossibly happy, and that was more than enough. Years from now, historians would write about the Duke and Duchess of Ashford, the scandal-touched marriage that had somehow transformed into one of the great love stories of their generation. They would note the Duchess's unconventional background, her intelligence and grace despite lacking traditional aristocratic training. They would discuss how she revolutionized estate management at Ashford Hall, championed education for tenant children, and became one of London society's most influential hostesses, despite, or perhaps because of, her illegitimate birth. They would write about the Duke who'd chosen love over bloodlines, who'd publicly defied his grandfather and society's expectations, who'd proven that nobility of character mattered more than nobility of birth. But they wouldn't write about the quiet moments, the mornings when Amelia would wake to find Nicholas already awake, watching her sleep with such tenderness it made her heart ache, the evenings spent in the tower room, reading to each other or simply existing in comfortable silence, the arguments that ended in laughter instead of resentment, the way they learned to communicate in glances across crowded ballrooms, entire conversations held without words. They wouldn't write about the 4 children who filled Ashford Hall with joy and chaos, 3 daughters and a son, each inheriting their parents' stubbornness and courage, or about how Nicholas taught them to choose love over duty, while Amelia taught them that their worth came from their actions, not their bloodlines. They wouldn't write about the letter Amelia kept in her personal collection, the one Jonathan Sheffield had written to Catherine weeks before his death, where he'd expressed no regret about loving her, only sadness that they'd been denied their chance at happiness, or about how Amelia would read it sometimes and cry for the father she'd never known, while Nicholas held her and reminded her that Sheffield's blood ran through her veins, giving her the strength to be brave when it mattered most. History would record the facts. A duke who married beneath his station, a duchess whose legitimacy was questioned, a marriage that survived scandal to become legendary. But the truth, the real, messy, beautiful truth, was simpler than any history book could capture. They'd loved each other, they'd chosen each other. They'd built a life defined not by duty or bloodlines or society's expectations, but by the daily decision to keep choosing love, even when it was difficult, especially when it was difficult. And in the end, that choice, renewed every morning, reaffirmed every night, made all the difference. What did you think of Amelia and Nicholas's journey from heartbreak to happiness? Which moment touched your heart most deeply? The discovery of the hidden letters, the wedding day revelation, or their quiet garden ceremony? These stories of love reclaimed, of second chances and choosing courage over fear, remind us that the greatest romances aren't always the smoothest. They're the ones where 2 imperfect people decide that being together is worth fighting for. If this story moved you, I'd be honored if you'd subscribe to the channel for more tales of aristocratic romance, scandal, and the triumph of love over duty. Leave a like if you believe, as I do, that the bravest thing we can ever do is choose love despite our fears. And share in the comments, have you ever had to choose between what was safe and what your heart desired? Thank you for joining me on this journey through the grand estates and greater dramas of Victorian England. Until our next story, remember, true nobility lies not in bloodlines, but in the courage to love authentically and completely. With warmth and gratitude, your storyteller.